In that case, we can get started. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
And we seconded. Discussion, all in favor? Motion passes. James, are you good with attendance?
We should probably align on who's absent and if we're gonna have any of the alternate vote.
You want to call the roll then?
I do think that we had the discussion the other day about it would go by vote. So if someone needs stuff out to go to the bathroom,
So you wanna do it later then?
as the vote's occurring, as he calls, if someone's not in the room at the time, we just go to our first and then our second. But if we want to get the roll in general, happy to do that.
No, we have a quorum, so we can restart. All right, so we're going in a little bit different order today. We're going to start with subcommittee report outs. We'll start with comps.
Libra, do you want to do the
Yeah, we're,
what's happening, or you?
I can do it. You wanna go over your surveys that first time?
All right, going to start with survey stuff?
Yeah.
All right, we'll start with survey. Okay, I sent out a draft to everybody last night. It was a little wonky in some of the formatting on the chart, so I have a new draft that I can send around. And really nothing has changed other than I fixed the charts so they weren't on only 2 pages and stuff like that. Paul has been my guide in how to make charts on Google, so thank you. So the comms team dug into this last week, and Paul's been really helpful. So thank you, really appreciate it, and we'll just sort of talk through the results. Okay, so what we did was, the first set of questions asked people to rate the perceived level of importance of various facilities needs. People ranked them from 1 to 10. What we saw last week was a listing by either mean or median. And what we did here was, in the start, we took the top scores and people who rated it an 8 to 10, compared to people who rated it 1 to 3. So people who thought it was important versus not important. Basically, it still ranks out in pretty much the same way that you saw in the mean and median, but it helps illustrate, where people's priorities are and what people are really behind, and what they're not behind. So the good news is that people definitely recognize the need for some significant upgrades, as you can see. Looking at the first 2 items in the chart, they are having facilities that meet modern fire, life safety, and electrical codes, updating plumbing, and HVAC systems, which is awesome. Interestingly, only 38% of people reported a high level of concern when they were asked about the current physical needs. That was question 1. But as soon as we started showing them exactly what we wanted to do, those rankings went higher, which is great. And that shows us that we just need to educate people about exactly what we want to do, and illustrate it, and just build support around this. And by the way, Paul, if there's anything you want to add, just jump in and do it.
I'm good.
Yeah, you're really good at this stuff. Okay. Okay, so the highest ranked educational priorities identified the need to modernize classrooms and to meet student needs at every level, and to provide adequate play space. And those top priorities include designing the learning environment to match current educational standards, adding facilities to meet the needs of special education students, maintaining functional playgrounds and parking, and replacing the modular classrooms. And some of the other desired upgrades, such as separate gym and cafeteria space and enlarging nurses' offices, were less well received. And the implication there is that we need to use this information to prioritize our trade-offs, but also if there's something that's really important that we need to educate around, we can see where those opportunities are. So. Next, getting to school preference, which is also part of this ranking. As you can see, there's still overall stronger support for the neighborhood primary schools versus building a new consolidated primary. And these results confirm the previous polling we've seen in November 2023 in the vote and in the school building survey in 2023. School preferences are also demonstrated in the individual responses to the options. And so in these, as you'll remember, respondents were code reports. Respondents were answering open-ended questions. What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? What are your questions about these options? And then our research team coded all those answers. And so what we're really looking at are common themes. What do people say? what are the common ideas? And the top responses that people gave when reviewing the options were still around, is it consolidated or is it a neighborhood? This chart shows the highest positive responses, which were, I like that it keeps the neighborhood schools. And that was for option A, and then option B, and on down the scale. We also asked and received the response and benefits. I don't like it, there are no benefits. And as you can see, those responses are lower for the neighborhood school options and higher for the consolidated option. When we asked a question about drawbacks, the highest drawback that we saw was, I don't like that it consolidates the neighborhood schools. So this is still an issue for us. Whether it's an education issue or it's an issue that we choose to, deal with as we move forward and decide which options. This is something we need to think about. One thing this chart doesn't show that I could add is for the consolidated plan, the highest positive score was for, I like that it consolidates the schools, and that was at 12%. And so I can add that. So the biggest area of concern with neighborhood schools is that they may lack flexibility and the potential as a long-term solution. And respondents just felt they didn't address overcrowding as well. So cost was also an issue, and interestingly, the biggest concern about cost was with option B. Implications there, looking at this data, is that we should definitely move forward at least one neighborhood school option, whatever that version is. And there's a lot of enthusiasm and strong support for a consolidated school for a lot of very strong reasons. If we choose to move one of those forward, we really need to A, make it affordable, but B, focus on the things that make it great. What are the priorities that can help sell that consolidated school? Did I skip one? No. Okay, so we got a lot of I don't know, and I prefer not to answer to these questions. And that could mean a couple of things. One is that people are persuadable, which is great, I hope. And the other could mean that people just found the survey overwhelming, which I know some did because it was a lot of information to work through. So we don't know. It's one of those two things. But the opportunity there is that we can educate the public. We have an opportunity to educate the public in a way that is easily digestible and that resonates with them. And so one key item would be to put together a packet with the two options and make sure we disseminate it, get it out to people, explaining what they are clearly, concisely, and in a way that's engaging. Next, this chart shows concerns about costs and locations. And basically, people are begging for info about how much it's going to cost and where it's going to be. No big surprise. Project cost and tax impact was the most common question asked for every single option. Cost concern was also the top right drawback for most options, and cost was the top concern under are there additional features you'd like to see? And also, are there any other ideas that you believe should be considered? So cost, cost, cost. The implications of this is that obviously we need to come up with a project that stays within the budget range that we discussed. And we need to communicate that in a way that people find relatable and persuasive, whether it's tax impact, I don't know, we need to find a way to communicate to that people so they understand the value of it. And in addition, we need to communicate the location as soon as we're able. And it would probably behoove us to also clarify that Scarborough Downs is not going to be one of those locations. It's still in the discourse. And then I have next steps, which are to use these survey findings to optimize plans and prioritize trade-offs. Identify the two options that will move forward to vote, or after we vote, and to inform the communications efforts about the selected options. And then we will share the survey findings with the public once they are in shape to do so. Questions?
I can just say I'm glad that we have Paul and Elizabeth on the communications committee, because dwelling into that amount of information that we got back with all of those comments and everything took a long time, and they both spent a ton of hours working this through with Harriman to try to get this so that people could look at it and digest it fairly easily. I know there was a workshop last week, I watched the meeting and everything, so again, we'll make the meeting. We do have a little bit of a challenge going forward, we're losing the leader, as most of you probably know. That's coming up, so we're not gonna be able to put anything in the paper. The other thing is, opposition isn't gonna be able to put anything in the paper either, so, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, so. But we're working forward, I purchased 14, and we had the sandwich board signs that Elizabeth's Association graciously let us use last time. But I run a golf tournament in Scarborough, so I purchased 14 of those. So we have about 14 of those we can put out for getting information out going forward for the upcoming forum, for the new survey that's gonna dwell into the information a little bit more. But I think the biggest thing that we need to do is just educate the public at this point, because people don't really seem like they understand a lot of what we're getting out to them. And they may not understand that there are implications for these schools, keeping all 4 of these schools, because they're all gonna cost a lot more money than it would be if it was one consolidated school, which no one wants. So we've got to address it and address it in a way, like Elizabeth said, that it seems like people might be amicable to actually changing their minds a little bit if we can give them the right information, we're going to keep the costs down. So we're really trying to find other alternative means to get the information out and just try to, I think we're gonna have to probably start bulletin boards and communities and things like that with these leaders going out, so. But we're working on it, and whatever you folks want us to do, we can certainly work with it. Like Elizabeth said, if you have any questions, please let us know so we can address it tomorrow in our meeting and see where we're going forward. Because right now, we're basically at the point where we're in a holding pattern until we get the information in.
Did you guys see any feedback off of the survey about where people, I know we were pretty active on Facebook, the leader, of course, which we're losing. Did you guys see any other outlets reported that people thought would be good to provide people information through?
The 2 highest was leader and what?
The leader,
Leader in social media, right?
the website.
And no new ideas that had cropped up or any specifics? Okay.
No, I wish.
We received a lot of email addresses.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's,
That would be great.
how many did we get?
So,
So that will help.
Yeah, Brian's working on that.
yes, so to send out the email blast every time there's a blog post that goes to the website announcing the new, the latest things. That actually goes, those are people who actively want to receive information.
And I'm gonna try in this next later or ad, I'm gonna try and include a QR code for additional people who want to sign up for it.
That's wonderful.
And my question was, do the schools have the newsletters? Is it possible, I think you had said maybe, that we can get things out to people on a periodic basis, just like Did You Know or whatever, so we can send one-off emails to folks like every 3rd week or something, just to keep the school population in, because we have all their emails.
Absolutely, because I mean, we're putting information in the district newsletter on a regular basis that this committee is feeding us already, so.
Yeah, because Sue made up a document, was she?
Right here.
Okay, over there. Sue made up a document with some questions, we'll have to dwell down on them a little bit, and basically it's just helpful hints, like going forward, like, did you know that if we do this, we do this, or, so we're working on that. I've talked to Scarborough TV and they've talked about putting things up after the school board meeting or after town council meetings, like the little blurb we had in between your meeting and your workshop, where basically they pop things up and just helpful hints for people to see. So hopefully if people are online, they can do that, and we'll also be on the YouTube channel because that's saved and recorded. So people that go in and look at it. So we're trying whatever media we can have or means we have to try to get the information out there. I was disappointed we only had 1,200 people. Everybody's told me that was great, but I was really hoping we'd get to at least 2,000.
Yeah.
Thanks, you guys, that was awesome. I'm just now getting a chance to look at the demographic breakout that you sent today. I don't know if people's had a chance to look at that, so if there's any comments. The things that jump out to me is the most contention around the consolidated school tends to come from families that don't have kids in schools. So I thought that's an interesting point.
Yeah, we did see that.
But that trend, right, anti-consolidated kind of, goes across all of the age groups of children and whatnot, but certainly the highest, and I've looked at this for literally less than 5 minutes, so.
Yeah, really interesting.
But that jumped out at me right away.
Can you say that a different way? Who
Right.
was, against the consolidated?
So the highest percentage of the demographic breakdowns of people that were against the consolidated school are families that either have no kids in their household or no kids in Scarborough schools.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely differences. So, for instance, how important is the cafeteria gym situation? If you don't have kids in school, not very important.
Right.
But as soon as you've got, the age group of 5 to 8 or whatever it was, you know what's going on. And so it's clear with a lot of these things, the more you know about the schools and the actual situation, the more, you're answering these questions the way you'd expect a parent would answer versus, and I see that even for when you have kids who are in the 15 to 18 age, it seems like the parents kind of forget at that point what it was like. Like the parking and the playground, not a big deal. And, yeah.
Right, well, I was actually just looking at the parking and the playground, and it's actually, I haven't kind of combed through every specific thing, but it's the one thing that all age groups across, 0 to 5, 5 to 10, everyone agrees is important.
And I think the big thing with the cafeteria and the gym being separate is what people don't understand is it's a huge educational piece because there's a time frame for gym, there's a time frame for lunch, you can't get all the kids in. And then if we're looking at pre-K or we're looking at aftercare, there's no room. So if you got a gym and a cafeteria and it's the same thing, plus you're transporting food from wherever it comes from, high school, middle school, or wherever, off to these secondary schools. The Board of Education told us that they want a separate gym and the cafeteria, so I think
Currently
that's,
drives the entire school schedule.
yeah, I think that's gonna be one of our first digital type things. There are reasons why we need both of these, and people may not understand that.
Well, and the implications of after-school care, I think it's far larger than kind of what it just sounds like, just people don't want to move it back and forth. It's really, there's so many other implications beyond that.
Dan, we were chatting last week, was it Wentworth you said was gonna have 4 lunch periods next year, starting at 10:30?
The middle school is going to have, next year actually, because again, last week I did all of the school site visits with our state officials. Todd and I did that, and each of our principals were the gracious hosts for the group. So, so I spent 2 full days just kind of like living and breathing like all of the details about all of the schools. But so so it sounds like a lot when you say, oh, Wentworth is going to have 4 lunches. Next year, the middle school is going to have 6 lunches. 6 lunches. They will start at 10:30 and they will end at 1:15 because, as most of you in this room know, the middle school cafeteria is greatly undersized. We have a very big 6th grade coming up, almost 250 students, and you cannot fit that number of students in that cafeteria. So currently this year, the 6th grade has 1 lunch and the 7th and 8th grade have split lunches. One of the grades has a split lunch in between an academic period. So you go to class for 15 minutes and then you go eat lunch and then you go back to class. I'd love to see the academic data for those students because I don't think that they are going to learn the same degree as their peers who are there for a whole period. But those are the trade-offs that we have to make when we have the kinds of space issues that we've been talking about.
Again, that's a huge educational piece because you have kids eating lunch at 10:30.
Yeah, so
You
now
have
they're gonna
parents
have to
calling
build
in,
in,
going, my
they're
kid's
building in
hungry
a
at
snack break at the middle school level. So there's gonna be a 10-minute snack break in the afternoon for 6th graders and a 10-minute snack break in the morning for 8th graders, right? Depending on who either has the first lunch or the last lunch.
And the kids arrive at what time and start school?
Yeah, they arrive at 7:40.
7:40 and then
And they leave at 2:25, so
Right.
some kids are not gonna have their lunch, like they're basically gonna have 1 period after lunch and then they're gonna go home.
yeah.
But these are the things that we don't have any options about.
That would be a really good thing for us to talk
Sounds like
about.
you just got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
put you on the spot, but thank you. All right, anything else for the communications committee? Tom, anything from the site selection committee?
We met, last week, we had input from the fire and police chiefs, actually, the fire chief met with us, talked through things there, we reviewed the weighted ratings, which did not change the overall rating, and we're compiling profiles for each site to include other considerations that may not be able to be so objectively considered. So we'll have that information to present when the time is right to present. Based on that.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for the site selection committee? All right.
Sorry, I did have one question. Have you guys determined, there was a reference last week that the site that is, I guess it was one site that could only accommodate smaller schools. Do you have any definition around what that is for grade levels or student population or anything?
I think we're thinking of basically a primary school.
Okay, so like 3 grades maybe, 3?
I think it was when you were considering like the 4th primary.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to the leadership update. And I don't have any like administrative stuff updates today. I just wanna sort of frame the discussion for kind of the rest of the day. I think as we get ready to make some vote, to pare us down to 2 options next week, some things that are kind of lingering that we need to decide on this week. We've seen a lot of alternate options have been brought forward with different options for the middle schools, right? So you have hybrid with MS1, hybrid with MS2, right? So Harriman has broken all of that down for us. I think we need to select which middle school option are we gonna try to move forward. We need to decide if we're gonna include the insulation and air conditioning now that we have those costs. I think they were presented 2 weeks ago. So do we include that in the scope as we move forward? Also, what are some of the implications and costs of deferring the middle schools? So that's been an option that's been presented to us to try to help the initial costs stay low. We could do some deferment. We've made a few comments around what that means for taxpayers and things like that. We probably need to make some decisions on that as well. And then obviously make some decisions around which alternate options and whether we want to include any of them in our considerations for next week. I know there'll be at least one motion on the floor today for that. I never answered your email, but I think probably the discussion block is probably the right time. And then so the way we'll do that today is Harriman has some, they've kind of reformatted the information and try to make it a little bit easier for us to digest. They're going to present that, and then what we'll do is we'll break out into a couple of groups, have some discussion around it, just sort of instead of feeling like you're on the spot in the big room, we'll just give everyone the opportunity to kind of go talk about it, digest it, share thoughts and concerns about the what you're seeing and the pros and cons, if you will, of the options, and then we'll come back together and we'll try to make some decisions around these. Tom has offered the conference room, his conference room over there across the hall if we need more space to have discussions. We'll do that for about 15 minutes. We'll break out after the presentation, give ourselves 10 to 15 minutes to just kind of brainstorm and talk through things, and then we'll come back into the room. Questions on kind of how today's going to go?
And I will just say that the packet that you have is really the executive summary of all the data that's in here. This is a really long PowerPoint. You don't have to be overwhelmed by it, but the information's there if you need it. In your packet is really the dashboards, is what we're calling each option, A, B, C, D, G, and then all of the alternatives. And behind each dashboard, you'll have the benchmarking. So that's kind of the high level data you need for all of those. And we try to summarize the cost conversation. Want me to jump into the middle school?
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right, so middle school options 1 or 2. We wanted to remind folks that there's technically 4 options for the middle school. A and B have 2 options, and and C, D, and G have two options. And the reason that is because A and D are looking at a 6 through 8 middle school, and C, D, and G are looking at a 7, 8. So we're gonna go through what those are and talk those through. I did just want to pull up in the beginning the enrollment that we're using. The chart will show you the different grade spans of all the different options. It then tells you the current, as of October 1, 2024 enrollment. It then tells you projected and projected with 3%, the school year that high enrollment hits, and then the time frame from today. And so this will just help frame the conversation if we get to any of the conversations, or when we get to conversations around deferring any of the scope. This will be helpful data for you to reflect on. Essentially, it's showing the immediate need is in the K2, right behind that. On the heels of that, I would say, is the 3-5, and then subsequent years is the 6 through 8. So the middle school options, A and B, we created this sort of cross comparison to try to make it easy to summarize the differences. Option A and B, middle school option 1, is a 6th through 8th grade. It's about $41 million plus or minus dollars. It improves the music spaces. It utilizes the existing stage as part of the cafeteria and builds a new stage. So this is enlarging the cafeteria eating space. It relocates art out of the classroom wing, and it addresses future enrollment projections. So it provides space for the high enrollment plus 3%. Option 2 for A and B also is for a 6th through 8th grade middle school. It's about half, it's 28.8 million plus or minus. It takes the approach of replacing portables. So the portables go away, it provides you 12 classrooms for the 6th grade as a permanent addition to the middle school. It does not address the undersized cafeteria. It does not address music, art, or return the stage to the cafeteria, and it does not address future enrollment projections. So it essentially addresses getting the kids out of the portable as part of the permanent building. It also has a small addition to the admin to make that a more secure entry. Those are the major differences between option 1 and option 2 as it relates to A and B. Now when we go to C, D, and G, these options for middle school are for 7th through 8th grade middle school because 6th grade has been moved to Wentworth. Or depending on the option, it is out of the middle school. Option 1, 7th through 8th grade is 23.9 million plus or minus. This does improve music spaces. It returns the stage to the cafeteria. It relocates art out of the classroom wing, and it addresses the future enrollment projections. Option 2, which is 16.5 million, does not address music or return the stage to the cafeteria, but it does address future enrollment projections. So those are the major differences between them. This chart starts to talk about the different things that we have put out there as to considerations for removing scope from the middle school options. The top part of the chart in the navy blue header are your options for A and B. You see option 1 and you see option 2. And it essentially gives you kind of a high level differences between those. So same information we just saw on the other slide. Then the green header gives you the summary for option 1 and option 2 for C, D, and G, the 7th grade middle school. And then there is red text at the bottom. We have put this out in some of the options, an option to defer all the middle school scope on these options. And essentially what you would do is the 7th and 8th grade would be in the building as it is today. We would remove the portables because the 6th grade has moved out, and we would repave that area. That would cost about 3.4 million plus or minus. So in lieu of the 23.9 or the 16.5, to do that work that I just talked about, the deferring the middle school scope but taking the portables away and repaving, that would now be 3.4 million for that. Another possible reduction So if we were to do the deferral of the middle school, there are no other further reductions, so we're gonna kind of put that over to the side. And we're gonna take this bottom one that says possible reductions that could apply to all options above, as we remove the minor renovation to the middle school, and that is essentially the replacement of finishes. And so finishes are things that could be done through CIP projects. They could be done over multiple years. And so there's 4.8 million of material replacement within the existing middle school as part of these options. So if you were to defer that, you could reduce A, B, option 1 and 2, each of them by 4.8 million, or option C, D, and G, 1 and 2 by 4.8 million. So those are the considerations for the middle school. On the next slide, it just shows you, because most people are probably thinking, okay, well, how does that impact these options? This is the summary where we go across A, B, C, D, and G. We show you the implications of doing what's included in those options with the middle school option 1, or the middle school option 2, depending on the option that it is. And in yellow, you can see those totals. And then below it, we have shown you any of the reductions that could be realized based on that last slide. So this really just gives you a snapshot of those totals. So that's what this slide does. And then in the following slides, we have all of the graphics that support this. So I'm gonna go through this pretty quickly. This shouldn't be news to anybody. These are the options you've already seen, but we've just lumped them together. So option 1, AB, you see that 2-story addition, you see the admin addition. Essentially what these floor plans look like. The major difference is the music program is part of this addition. And you have all the classrooms to accommodate that future enrollment. Option 2 does not address that music program, so you no longer see that there, and it just brings in the classrooms for the 6th grade. So it's not addressing the future enrollment projections. It's giving you those 12 classrooms per grade. Option 1, CDG, has a addition of classrooms on the right-hand side, a addition at the admin, and an addition at the classroom wing. So I shouldn't say classroom, it should be music. So next to the gym, we have right-sized music in the PE classroom. At the end of the classroom wing, you see a classroom addition, and that is to get the grade levels to the number of classrooms that they need for the future enrollment. And then the admin has that addition out front. Another option is option 2. And this one, the major difference is it does not address those music programs, but it does put an addition at the end of the classroom wing. And here we've done classrooms on both sides so we can accommodate art on this level and another classroom grade. And then on the 2nd story is the PE classroom and another classroom. And then we have the admin addition here. So that's a really quick rundown of the differences in the school. You want me to keep rolling into insulation and AC? All right. So the next slides talk about if you were to add insulation and air conditioning. The existing primary buildings do not have adequate insulation. Essentially, they're about an R3 in some areas. Code today is close to R21. So there's a big difference between what exists today and where you want the building to be. And the insulation really helps to make sure that any energy you're putting into the building to heat or cool the building, you are being as efficient as possible and keeping that energy in the building instead of it leaking through the walls due to lack of insulation and or infiltration. All that said, here's a breakdown of what it would cost for air conditioning and insulation. The air conditioning numbers focus on the primary schools and any new school in that option. The cost for the additions to the middle school as well as to Wentworth factored that in because those buildings already had AC, so it was an extension of those buildings. But right now the primaries do not. And then a new school, just to keep it apples to apples, we didn't put it in there, so you can decide whether to add it. So it varies per option, and so you can see the different options across the screen, A, B, C, D, and G, and then the subtotal for what it would be to add air conditioning to each of those. They range from low 6 millions to almost 10 million, depending on the option. And then for the insulation, it is for the primary schools about 3.5 million to insulate the existing primary schools. So any new addition would have adequate insulation, but the existing, you would need about 3.5 million to adequately insulate those existing buildings. And so this chart then subtotals out at the bottom if you wanted to see what those numbers added together look like. And then we took it one step further and said, okay, what if you were to add these to the options? So down across the top, you see the different middle school options. This doesn't account for any of the deferral or any of the moving of work in those middle school options. It then shows the adding of insulation and what that would do to the number, and adding the AC. So these have added to each other. So it just gives you that total at the bottom if you're interested to see what that looks like. All right, would you like me to move on to deferring middle school in Wentworth?
Yeah, maybe let's just pause there. Any?
Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to the insulation, are you replacing, on the 3 elementaries, are you replacing the roof completely and insulating? Like, how does that work? And the reason that I'm asking is that, you know, I had been reading about the new building code. And in that material, it was explaining that we already are at like 90%. And so the new code gets us to like 94%. And so it's for millions of dollars, and that people will have to, you know, like add insulation. We're not really getting very much value. So when I think about those older buildings, and I know like they're not well insulated, but my understanding is that most of the heat loss is through the roof. Less through the walls. Yes, there still is a lot of heat loss, but when you've got a lot of windows too, you know, like the windows are staying.
Yeah, actually they're being replaced, that's probably.
So are there, like, not to, you know, cut this into, slice it and dice it, but are there options when it comes to insulation? Like, we get the biggest bang by taking care of all the roofs. And then as we have money, we can work on the sides of the buildings, or there'll be an addition.
We can look at that analysis. I would still carry about that 3.5 million just for a budgetary number. So until we can do that analysis on the options. The report the information that you just referenced, most likely is talking about where the code is today versus where it's going. And you have to remember, these buildings aren't anywhere close to meeting today's code.
Right.
So there's a big gap.
But the marginal, I mean, yes, of course, if we took care of the roofs, we would get a huge improvement. But do we get that same thing with all the walls of the buildings?
We can study that as we move forward, but I think we'd have to carry the budgetary number to be able to have that in the estimate.
I know Todd's been doing a lot of work.
I can share the roofs are insulated to some extent. They're not R38 or whatever the modern code is yet, but they're not uninsulated.
Right.
Just to be clear, so we can go over the roof diagrams, we can see what's where to determine that. But you're losing the majority of your heat through the walls and windows right now in those old original sections.
Just out of curiosity, Todd, is that mostly air loss or insulation? Is it an air sealing problem or is it an insulation problem?
Insulation.
It's insulation.
I mean, people will say the windows are drafty. Sit next to any window in January, they're gonna say it's just colder, but
Okay.
I mean, those windows were replaced in '92, so they're not original to the building. They're 32 years old or whatever, so they're not. You can't feel the wind blowing through them unless you're sitting with your back right against the glass. You know what I mean? But they're not modern windows either. So.
Todd, can you give us a sense of how much you spent on heating, so that we'd have to say, like, you know, what type of efficiency improvement would we need to have in order to make it ROI competitive?
We burn about 25,000 gallons of oil a year at those 3 schools. So depending on the cost per gallon, which we usually get in the $2 to $2.50 range, depending on the market. So you can do that math.
Okay.
Sometimes we burn a little more if we have a severely cold winter.
Yeah, and there was a chart earlier and we can resurrect it, but comparing the primary cost per square foot to operate from a fuel standpoint compared to like your newer school Wentworth, it'll show you a major difference.
Sorry, Todd, did you say 25,000 gallons per year?
Yes.
Across the three?
Yeah.
$62,500 at $2.50 a
Alright, sure.
So I have a question for the superintendent. Sorry. That's okay. I want to talk for a moment about the middle school options that we were discussing before, the insulation and AC. And if the option that the community ultimately goes with is one that keeps the middle school to 6 through 8, and we opt for this option 2, which does not address the cafeteria issues. I'm not sure if it was before the meeting or just after we started, but you had mentioned that at current enrollment, you're looking at 5 lunch periods.
So we currently have 5, we're looking at 6
for next year. And this year, as a 6 to 8, based at least on what I'm seeing here, you have 668 students. You're projected in 9 to 10 years to have 923. How do you have 923 students? Assuming no contingency, have lunch, practically speaking. Do you have them eating lunch at 9:30 in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Do you have them eating in?
It's not practical, right?
Right,
And
and-
so we would be, really needing to be looking at what are other ways in which students can eat lunch, including in the classroom. And contractually, that would become a major issue for us with our staff because, staff, as you probably all have at your own jobs, get to have a lunch period as well, right? And so we can't expect our staff to be with our students 100% of the time. So you're exactly right, like if we are not looking ahead to solving this middle school problem, we will be sitting on a major issue in about 10 years.
Thank you.
Sorry, Jim.
Todd, what type of installations are in the wall now at the elementary school?
Fiberglass, bat insulation.
And a question for Harriman. On the numbers that we have on this packet, these are today's numbers? These numbers don't take in the so-called tariffs that the president's playing around with?
Essentially, they have escalation built into them about the time of this project. They do not have a specific tariff number because that changes by the day. That's something we can't predict. But it also has soft costs, and in the soft costs, we account for contingencies. So there are some contingencies in there.
Sorry, I think Matt, made a great point. So if it's $60K per year, assuming we get a 50% improvement in efficiency, you're saving $30K a year. It's gonna take you, 100 years for this to be ROI positive.
Get out there.
While he's doing the math.
It all depends on the cost of the fuel too, that's based on $2.50 a gallon.
Okay.
So you'll have some years that are gonna be, offset one way or the other.
Okay.
To that note though, I'm sure these don't include any state or federal rebates or tax credits, but I'm assuming we can potentially apply and find some savings there.
Yeah, and part of it too, it's not just insulation, because that is the cost of the insulation, and if it's in certain areas, it's done on the outside, so now we will replace all of the, exterior sheathing, the finishes, all of that outside of that insulation, and it's done on the inside. Now we have to replace all the gypsum board, we have to replace the casework, anything up against that wall as well.
So my mind was going in the same exact place when we started talking about 6 lunch periods. So I was wondering with option A and B, options 1-2, can you add a cafeteria and arts, music arts, and do some sort of modified cafeteria?
So option 1, just to be clear, AB option 1 addresses the cafeteria. It takes over the utilizes the existing stage as part of the cafeteria space. So it expands that way.
The question that I hear Fred asking is, if you took option one, and tell me if I'm correct, Fred.
Yep.
If you take option one, but you remove the art
Yeah.
out of the classroom wing, so if you cut the other classrooms, like the art section out, but you
Well, that would
have
be
the
the
cafeteria.
So over.
Is that what you're saying, Fred?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
So you're talking about like over here is the music area. Art is in kind of the art wing over here. So you're talking about, we would, instead of doing the music, we would add
Cafeteria?
Yeah, I mean, sort of your top level analysis of option two was that option two for the middle school will simply resolve taking the kids out of the portables. And so I'm saying, all right, what if we do that simple solution of get the kids out of the portable and a cafeteria?
Okay, so that would be option two in addition to. So you take this and add a cafeteria addition.
I think so. I think that's what yeah. So, and I'm wondering, is it that far off of option one? Or is it somewhere in the middle? At some point we're gonna start nickel and diming.
Yeah, we have to look at it. The challenge with adding onto this cafeteria is where your utilities come in. And it's not easy to add on, which is why an option, we can look at anything.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, but some of the challenges that we're faced with are those specifically, which is why we started going internally and
Yeah.
taking like to the stage side to kind of expand that way.
Okay.
So we're not on top of the utilities that are over here. Again, we can look at it and maybe, we're gonna be challenged as to where we can put it, but we can look at it.
What percentage increase would the stage provide? Would that be sufficient to meet the need? Would it help enough to justify the cost?
So our stage right now is not really usable because most of the stage has been taken over by the music space, right? So we're not sacrificing the stage by making those changes to the cafeteria that Lisa's suggesting because we don't currently have.
No, I'm wondering if the,
How big is the stage?
how much
more?
space it would add and whether the cost would, whether that would meet the need. Is that sufficient to meet the need?
By moving the stage, how many more kids are you gonna be able to?
Yeah, I mean, we have to look at it from a square footage standpoint. But I guess my wonder about what's being discussed is, right, like the way that this current configuration looks, we're moving the music classrooms to the new addition, and so we're using the current music space to help the cafeteria grow. If we do what Fred is suggesting and don't do the addition, then now we have no place for music, right? So we either have to say, we're gonna sacrifice the cafeteria or we're gonna sacrifice our music program, because they're not, they don't work together.
Yeah, and I'm not disputing that.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering is whether it's worth, whether that addition of this space would meet the needs.
Yeah,
So,
it potentially
you're not
could.
answering
Only in
that.
totality, I feel like.
I think, so it's about probably another 600 to 800 square feet onto your cafeteria. You could then make the argument that we don't build a new stage, because you're not using one today, and use that space as more cafeteria space if we have to expand it further. So this has the flexibility to kind of make that space as big as needed.
Yeah, because the reality is, as it relates to the stage, our cafeteria is nowhere near like a performing arts center, right? So even if we built a beautiful stage, it is still in a very small cafeteria, right? So that might not be the best spend.
I got you next. Just on that, so today, for the middle school performing arts programming, are they going to the high school to do performances?
Yes.
And how problematic is that?
It's a
It's
scheduling
a scheduling
thing.
issue, right? Go ahead.
Could you go to the zoomed in that you had just had? I apologize. The two blue, words hard. We have.
Above the cafeteria?
Yes, thank you.
Stage art.
That's art right now.
it is not, it's music now, but your art is in a classroom, and so this would put it in a space similar to its cohort right here, which is the other art room.
Would it be an option to just make that more cafeteria? It'd be a very long cafeteria.
Well, that's what I'm
but-
saying, you could take over this stage area right here and move the cafeteria up to here.
Sorry, whatever, I'm not seeing wherever you're
Oh, you
moving.
can't see where my little thing is.
No.
I'm
See
sorry.
where it says red new addition?
Yes.
I can't do it.
Oh, there it is, now I can see it.
That could become part of the cafeteria.
That's, yeah,
This right here can be part of the cafeteria.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Right, because the problem that we've been talking about through this whole process is, you know, it's one thing to say how many classrooms do you need for instruction, but if we're not addressing the need for core spaces to be right-sized, then we're not solving the problems, right? Because we'll continue to have problems with our core spaces if we don't address those.
So we know that the enrollment, we know this bump is coming through and it will eventually reach the middle school. But then what happens? In all likelihood, the trend reverts to what it's been, which is declining school enrollment. And so can we address this by, I know they make portables that are cafeterias, that, you know, like do we need to do a permanent building and plan for a forever enrollment of 923 or whatever it is? Because that's very likely gonna happen for 2 years and then we start on the downslope.
I guess
Well,
I would suggest to you though, Sue, that, you know, what I've been talking about for the last few minutes, we currently have 660 students in the middle school and our cafeteria is not the right size. So, you know, I understand what you're saying about over 900, but it is not large enough for today's students. So we're not just talking about a bubble coming through.
Right, and we don't know that it's gonna go back down to this level. We're building so many new single-family homes. It's development after development after development of houses that fit families with children. So to kind of, if there was no building at all in town, we could probably say, yeah, there's some sort of COVID bubble coming through. We're not having any development. We're not seeing any of the new homes. We're not seeing anyone want to move into Scarborough. Like, we are known for how wonderful of a town we are to live in. So I don't think that, unless something catastrophic happens in Scarborough, I don't think we're ever gonna be a non-desirable place to live. So while I think it would kind of move all of our problems along in a little bit of a different direction, like I don't know if we should be making decisions with the expectation that we'll come back down, because we're just gonna kick the problem down the road.
I think that
We
might
gotta,
be,
we gotta move forward,
so I think that might be somewhere in the middle, because there are population projections built into those models.
I just mean with the expectation to come down to this level again.
I agree with.
Yeah.
Charlie, I got one more question. The original Plan A that was presented to this panel in phase 1 addressed the cafeteria, addressed the music room, addressed the art room, and put on the second gymnasium. That was scrapped after the second or third meeting. They were eliminated because the administration said that it wasn't needed. Now we're talking about it?
No.
Did
So
we
We
ever,
said we didn't need a gym, that's what we said, we didn't need a second gymnasium.
did we ever cost out the original plan for the middle school as presented by phase 1?
This has the scope, except for the gymnasium from phase 1.
As I remember phase 1, there was an addition put on the cafeteria.
So we have expanded the cafeteria, but inwards. We have taken over interior space to make the cafeteria bigger,
What's the difference between expanding and adding on?
less expensive. Because you're expanding inside, so you're taking over adjacent program space. So like if this was the cafeteria and we took over that space,
But
next
you
door-
added on the other end for the music room.
because the music is undersized.
Well, if you're adding on for the music room, it should be about the same dollar amount.
A cafeteria and a kitchen is much more expensive to build than a music classroom.
The other thing is, if you
For
add
for the addition, it wouldn't. The addition would be for the seating area. You already have the kitchen area and everything.
So essentially, adding on to that cafeteria outside is tough because of all the utilities that are down there. So that's why we went inside on that. Because there's a bunch of utilities coming into that kitchen and cafeteria to where building an addition down in that southern region is pretty cost prohibitive.
Where that
Because-
driveway is, that utility driveway.
Yeah.
We can't build on that.
That's why the portables are there.
Well, you
Right.
you could if you moved the utility.
But that's cost,
That's cost prohibitive.
Huge
Yeah.
amount.
But underground or aerial?
Underground.
So essentially, this has all the scope, to your point, except the gym, because we were told the gym was not needed, the second gym. So this has all the scope that option A originally had. And so this is, that is essentially the, let me get back there, the $41 million option A, or option 1 for A and B.
I'll have to review option A from phase 1.
Jim, if you want your gym in there, you're looking at 41 million plus whatever for the gym.
No, I don't want the gym. But it seems, as we went through this from phase 1, they cut out a lot of this stuff. Now we're back talking about it again.
I don't,
And my
I'm
question
not
is, did we ever cost out the original plan A as presented?
This is a
Minus
different scope.
minus the gymnasium.
This is the same scope we talked about at the beginning. She just presented an option to reduce scope, and that's what option 2 is, it just reduces part of the cafeteria scope. But option 1, A1, is the same scope that we talked about months ago, back in whenever we started in November.
I'll have to look.
Okay.
That's one question.
Very quick, okay.
For the
It's never the question, it's the answer.
Diane,
Great line.
Diane, do you know, like, other school districts, what's normal for lunches? How many most other schools have? Probably don't.
I mean, I think that schools are all over the map when it comes to that, right? I don't think that anyone, in a school district says, hey, I've got the best idea ever, let's start serving lunch at 10:30, right? The schools that are doing that out of necessity, not out of, the idea that that is best practice.
I will say that the Department of Education, their guidelines base the size of their cafeteria based on 3 lunches.
That's what I want.
And the other thing that all schools try to stay away is a split, where you go
Yeah,
math for
that's the
15
worst.
minutes, lunch for 25 minutes, math for 35 minutes, that's a huge thing we try to stay away from, but we always can't.
Don't do that.
So what do you about the next one, Travis?
Yes, thank you.
I tried to make it.
Well, I know that was just an hour and a half is gonna be 2 hours.
All right, so implications in cost of deferring middle school and or Wentworth scope, both of these have been put out there as different ways to reduce. They all have implications. So options A and B, the middle school, deferral considerations, there is no option that we presented with deferring the scope for 6 through 8 options, as in the 6th grade will remain in place. So essentially, the only deferral scope we have put out there for options A and B middle school is to where you reduce or defer the finish material within the existing. So options C, D, and G middle school, essentially, if you were to defer the work, as in you keep the 7th and 8th graders in the building as it is today, the 6th graders have moved out, you essentially would reduce middle school option 1 by 20.5 million and option 2 by 13.1. So essentially, it's going to cost you that 3.4 plus or minus to remove the portables and restore the parking. If you defer the work at Wentworth School, this would reduce the total project cost of the options by 9.5 million plus or minus. However, Wentworth School will not be able to accommodate increased students and programming. This is approximately 200 plus or minus students that are already born. Population growth impacts Wentworth in the next 5 to 6 years. And this occurs in the prior years in the middle school. Something to keep in mind, 5 to 6 years sounds far out. From right now, I know I'm shaking my head no, but right, some people may, from right now, if you were to pass a referendum in the fall, that project that gets passed, best case scenario, you're occupying that building for 3 years. So that would already be 3.5 years out, and then those kids are coming in 2 after that. So you wouldn't even really have time to think about an alternative project and get it out in time. So just something to think about.
Does the Wentworth deferral refer to all 5 options or just CD?
It refers to all. Oh, okay. So the next slide you're gonna see, I mean, it can be an option for all of them. It has the same implications on all 5 options. So then we just put together a chart so you can see what that means for A and B. If you were to, or the first red line, row I should say, is if you were to remove the material replacement in the existing school, what that new total would be. The second line is remove middle school scope except pavement and removal of portables. That does not apply to A and B, but then you can see what that does for reductions at C, D, and G. And then if you were to defer the addition to Wentworth, you can see what that would do to the total. And so these are all cumulative, just so you know, in this chart, to give you that snapshot. The next topic is determine next steps, for modified alternate options. You want me to continue right into that? Okay. So we have our A, B, C, D, and G, our 5 options. Through the survey and through conversations with this committee, alternative options have come forward. We have studied them at a high level. We heard a request that you kind of want to see them all in one place to understand what they are and see if there's any merit to any of them to continue forward in any form. I will say that keep in mind, as we're talking about all options, in this process, it is not unique that you may say, hey, just like you did with A and B and it became a hybrid. That's very common. You're going to see strengths and weaknesses between different options. So just kind of keeping that in mind. This is how we grouped them together. The AB hybrid, which is essentially, these are all really options that already exist, but variations of them based on feedback we got either in the survey or from this group. And so what you'll see is we put a identifier on the left-hand side in the yellow circle. The top 2 are variations of options A and B. And so we have option AB-A and option AB-B. And what that means is that those remaining primary schools were based on option A, or they were based on option B in these. And so AB hybrid based on option A is about 112.6 million plus or minus. And then we just gave a high-level summary of the big things that this option does. In the backup, you have all the granular detail, but we thought this would be an easy way just to try to digest them. This closes Pleasant Hill and builds a new 3rd K2 300-student school. It expands the other 2 existing primaries to similar sizes. So that is AB hybrid A. AB hybrid B is about 121.4 million. It closes Pleasant Hill and builds a new 3rd K2 primary, about 450 students. Expands the other 2 primary schools, but the new school would be about 2 times the size of the other 2 schools. The other 5 options we're calling alternate. Essentially, these are things that came up in the summary. The people said they took the survey, and essentially they had another idea or a tweak on one of our ideas that we explored further. So alternate B1A. We tried really hard to figure out some way to name these. Is 107.1 million. This expands all primary schools to K3. 8 Corners would be expanded to 2 times the size of the other 2 schools. The reason 8 Corners is chosen, it has the most land, and area to expand. Alternate, V1B, expands, is 104.6 million plus or minus, expands all primary schools to K3, but 8 Corners would be expanded to 3 times the size of the other 2.
Is that
Three-story
up?
version.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, there's additions. We'll show you, there's a,
It's coming, okay.
yeah, I think we put it in there. All right, well, we will follow up with that. We have it laid out, because we wanted to test fit it. So essentially, it has 2 additions, one is a 3-story and one is a 2-story off the sides, for those options. Sorry?
Impacts playground space, I assume, or
We
parking.
tried to keep it out of that hill in the back to retain that, and as well as get a fire lane around those additions. So, I apologize, I thought there's more than enough information in this PowerPoint, but we will follow up with that. But we will send those, because I think it's good for folks to see that. All right, moving on to alternate, from the survey version 2, based on option A, so this is all B2A. This is 146.1 million plus or minus. This closes 8 Corners and builds a new 3rd K3, about 552 students. Expands the other 2. The new school will be 2 times the size of the existing 2 that were expanded. Alternate from survey version 2, based on B, this is 135.9 million plus or minus. This closes 8 Corners and builds a new 3rd K3, 676 students, and it expands the other 2. The new school would be 3 times the size of the other 2. So essentially what those last 2 groupings we're looking at is, can you expand one of the existing to essentially create a larger school to accommodate the K3 populations, or in the last 2, it was really just replacing one of those with a larger school. And each option has different sizes for those. The last option, alternate B3, is 127.2 million plus or minus. This closes primary schools and builds 1 new K2 of about 142 students. So that's the big picture of what these are. And just so that folks that like to stay in the same language of how we've presented these previously, this is the diagrams that go with those 7 options. And then further on, that we were asked to kind of break down the cost and the population and things like that. So you have all of this information in the PowerPoint. And then you have a dashboard for each one. And what we did in the dashboards, you really have a dashboard for every option at this point, is we have the diagram, and then below we have the cost, rough order of magnitude, and we tell you what it is, and then we tell you what it is with air conditioning and insulation, so you make a snapshot there. And then the benchmarking compromises, we looked at the benchmarking and just highlighted, here are the things that popped out as it doesn't address. And so this is just a major summary, and then we have all of the data on the right, and then behind that the benchmarking. I'm not gonna go through all of these, that's kind of what the conversation's for. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? I think it's slide 52. It's number 52 on the PDF. It's the comparison of the A-B hybrid options.
Oh, wait a
It's
minute.
there are 2 tables next to each other.
Which, I'm sorry. This one?
Yes, that one. So in looking at these, both of these options have the middle school staying as K through 8. However, both of them.
The middle school staying is 6 through 8?
Sorry, what did I say, K through 8?
Yeah.
Warming here. But what I'm noticing is that both of these tables are only pricing out middle school option number 2, which does not, if I recall, address the cafeteria.
That's correct, so that is something to note in these tables that does that, we would have to add on those
Okay.
other ones. In a later table, I think we have the summaries of all of the options as well.
Thank you.
Now I'm hot since you said that. All right, let me get down to, again, you have all this data, and it'll be really good for conversation. This, let's see. Yep, so this only has the middle school option 2, so essentially, you would have to add another 20 million to that number for option 1.
For the alternative options, versions 1 and 2, the middle school option in those scenarios was from the CDG. scenario, just so it's, the primary schools are based on option A or option B, but the middle school is based on option C. To confuse it more.
Alright, so.
Here's one.
Let me try to explain this line here. So across the top, we have all of the hybrid options. All the options, the new options, I should say. The hybrid is based on option A in the first column, option B in the second column. And then we go to alternate from survey version 1, it's A, B, A, B. That A and B just refers to the fact that the existing primary schools were based on that A or B option. But to the point that Emily is making, the middle school option in these totals is option 2 across the board. We picked one because it was getting confusing to have all these different numbers on here. If you want to have in here option 1 for any of those, then we need to add that total back from this number back here. In the middle school. Way back here. So you would add for A and for the 6th to 8th grade, if there was 6th to 8th grade in that option, you'd add another 20 million to get it up to having that cafeteria, and the other two, it depends on which one you want to go, because they both address the teacher population. Does that muddy the answer or the
No, I
question?
think it actually answered
Okay.
my question, I just didn't read far enough.
Yeah. There's a lot. All right, so I think, let me just, sorry if I'm making people ill. In here, so essentially in your packet, you have a dashboard like this and the benchmarking for all of the options. And then that takes us to the discussion block.
Thank you. So let's break up into small groups and just kind of have some discussions around those topics that we talked about. The dashboards, I think, are hugely helpful, specifically as we get into like trying to eliminate options. I encourage you to take the packets, rip them off the staples, lay the dashboards next to each other so you can kind of see pros and cons of each one. And I just ask that over the next 15 minutes, stay focused on middle school options, AC, and then these alternatives, so we can come back and make some decisions around that. We'll vote on elimination, the larger elimination next week.
So essentially you want all of this to be discussed in their groups.
Yeah.
There are people who didn't get packets, I know Ray has some extra, so we can make sure that you have these for your discussion.
Everybody have a packet?
Who does not have a packet?
I got my last stuff.
Okay, so we'll just to take it easy, we'll just count off, we'll do 3 groups. Start with you, Diane, we'll just go this way.
1,
2, 3.
Race 4.
4.
No, 1.
Better listen better.
2, 3, 4.
1.
No, 1.
I got you going the wrong way, I'll take some leave from that.
So you're 1, you're 1.
2.
Oh wait, you're not Paul.
We have one more back here too.
1,
Oh, it's
2. Emily, you're 3.
Thank you.
1.
2.
2.
1, 2.
3.
1,
2.
3.
1.
2.
1.
Alright, where do you want people to go?
I can take one of the groups to talk about.
Perfect. Wasn't group 1 go with
We'll take group 1 there, we'll put group 2 on that side of the room, and group 3 on this side of the room.
Where's one going?
You're going with
It's on the pump.
Yeah,
you're 1 and 2. Yeah, I'm 1.
I just followed you.
come join too.
This is really.
Oh, you're in group 3.
Exactly. Thank you for noticing. I was going to group 4.
So are you going to?
I got kicked out of my own group.
Yeah, I think 3.
Group 2, still 3. Great.
I'm in The hardest
Paul,
part
go
is
get
so
it.
far is count
Three?
Oh, okay.
three.
I wonder if, I'm number two.
Which is, you wanted to.
Over there.
All right, April, I don't know if you saw time.
So what number are you coming to?
Three.
No, we're three.
Two's over there.
We're three.
I'm three.
I'm three.
I said four, then I
Matt, that's must,
He was
must
gone,
have.
so I think I'm three.
Can we slide down to her? Are you in three? We'll slide down to you.
Three.
Like he's a middle-aged child.
Emily, can you come here?
Oh, yeah, and he is so great. I don't know where what Tom.
She's happy there.
No, my leg is good today.
Oh, okay.
Oh, your leg, oh, sorry, I didn't realize.
I have walked all day.
I love the sweater. The sweater.
Kelly, just stay there. Stay there, fine.
Good. I got it, there it is.
So there is a plan, there is a planning board
So
meeting.
I'm
tomorrow,
thoroughly
so,
confused. I thought we had 5 options, and now I feel like we have like 20. Yeah.
Just hi, Rick, someone kicks off here.
Oh. I thought they were interrupting us.
You want to start your number one middle school option?
They're not interrupting.
So middle school, let's talk about maybe middle school options first. I think if you have 6 to 8.
I think there's
I think
it might look like that.
Option 1 sounds like it's probably required for a 6 through 8 option.
Seems like this is only
Maybe
Yeah.
my first
Otherwise,
question
people are
on
gonna
that would
having
be,
lunches in classrooms.
based on what we just discussed, which to me was new about the cafeteria not being adequate. Do we want to, as a group, are we going to put forward something that doesn't address that?
I got looking at doubling the educational requirements.
That's why I was asking, you know,
When everybody else is saying
cafeteria space minus the
I
music
can't imagine a
space.
kid
Well,
eating at lunch at 10:30.
I didn't really get a good answer.
I don't remember really hearing from school,
That's the
that, you
hard
know,
part,
the
even if it's school at 7:30,
administration
you have
that
to wait till
that was
I get
a
hungry.
problem. That I don't feel like any of us have been working on that.
So
middle school's far more.
I think for 6 through 8, like middle school option 1, I think we kind of figured that out. Like I wasn't really paying attention to the 7 through 8 option. And then when they started doing the hybrid,
Yes, they did, yeah.
area hybrid options, a lot of those are actually 7 through 8.
But I think
So
the
we
Fred's
probably
point
follow the
I don't
7
think
through 8
option
middle school options, 'cause I didn't really
two
follow that at all.
needs to look like it does right now, but I don't think we can, wait, which one's the full renovation? Okay, so
Yeah,
I
I don't think
think
so.
option one could look different than it does right now. I don't think we should spend a lot of time figuring out how to make option two work if it's not gonna address that.
I don't understand how Wentworth,
Like 10:30, it's only getting
I just,
earlier.
an
So
option,
if
right.
you look at this one, right?
Wentworth has 3 grades at 900 kids. And
Just
then-
the AV. I got an idea.
So yeah, the ABs are 6 through 8, but actually all these other ones.
Those are all the alternatives.
Yeah.
So I would just
okay,
kind of
so
ask just to
alternative.
get a final word.
Hybrids or alternatives.
Okay,
Can we
sorry.
make that option work a little bit more with the
So the
cafeteria
alternatives
space?
though, I've never really considered these too much.
Without music space.
Especially like alternative G1A, I think it's pretty much like option A, it's a little bit different. So that, all these are 7/8. What do you know about these 7/8
I guess I don't know enough about it, but
They talked about it.
What I asked Aaron to have one of their.
that's not what I said.
I
know. I guess what I'm asking
Oh, that'd be
is,
great.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
what do we do right now for?
So we're trying to.
So the art is currently in a regular size classroom, and we repurpose to make.
We got questions.
And build.
So the
additional
7/8
art
middle
room
school
that's
option.
properly art size. Art classrooms are typically a little bigger.
What's the difference
Wondering how
between
the resources that a regular classroom does.
one's like improved music phase.
So one
So does
screen or
option
one
two
essentially
have
focuses,
0
option
classrooms
one
dedicated to any
is
arts in
going
music?
to,
No.
have
Okay.
your improved, I gotta see the plan, I'm sorry. I don't have it memorized, let me go on my computer.
Here, please.
Maybe I should just look at it.
Art in, you're talking about in without, in.
The middle
You're just
school option
asking.
2.
Between the 2 versions
Yeah.
that put 7
So
and 8th
there's
grade
still
only in
that
middle
space
school, what are the
might
two
be-
choices?
Yeah. And cause it's, I was looking at it here, right, and it's like improves
No, the
music
band room
space,
remains
I don't know,
in
but
the
like,
space
for me, it like it was,
where they
I think
are.
Michael made a pretty good point about
Okay.
option A, like might be
So
the
where's the
best
band
option, but I don't know about these if there's any
Yeah.
like showstoppers.
So,
The band plays where it
So
is.
stay
the
with
plans show it best.
So,
So
so
I'm
the
gonna-
option 2 means the cafeteria is not really expanded much.
Right.
Yeah, your summary
Right,
of
so
this
in
is
this
does
one,
not
we
address
have an
music,
addition
art,
here,
return to the
here, and
stage, the
here.
So
cafeteria.
every, yeah, all those.
What this is gonna
programs
do is it improves
'Cause like
your
right
art,
now,
music, and your
it's not
PE
ideal
space
for
here. So they wanted that,
band,
that
to be
classroom
honest,
to be able to
and
do
and it's not
classroom-related
ideal
work with
cafeteria
the gym
for
class.
So like,
It then
it doesn't
adds,
overly
you need
work
an
for-
extra classroom
Yeah,
per
it works
grade
for both,
to get it
but
to the
it's not,
number of
you know,
classrooms
best
to
right now.
accommodate the future enrollment.
And it's only.
So this is a
I mean, like,
two-story
we
addition here, one
definitely,
7th grade,
you know,
one 8th
running
grade.
a band schedule, it's based on a lunch schedule, just like.
So the
Eight
enrollment,
Corners is running
wait,
phys ed
so
schedule. It's
right now
based
there's
on
660
lunch
in the
schedule.
middle school?
I think it's, well, with 6th grade.
Yeah, and then it
I guess
goes,
what, I
with
guess
7 to 8,
just
does that go
including
down
all
or does it
that,
stay
I would
around
say
It's gonna go
option
down
2
because you're taking a whole
of
grade
hybrid
level out,
AV.
but the 7th
You
and
guys
8th
can
grade
keep that
number
straight.
goes up.
Yeah, exactly.
It
So
might
what's
be
the
worth
net?
pursuing
So you essentially need an
if we
extra
put more
classroom
emphasis
per
on
grade
cafeteria.
to accommodate that future enrollment.
Yeah, I don't know
I'm
if I'm
thinking about the
beating
effect
a
of
dead horse
that.
on this
No.
one. Yeah, middle
Because
school,
we're
yep.
removing a whole grade,
Yeah,
it
But I
shouldn't
think-
be,
so are we
you shouldn't have the
asking-
congestion that they're having right now.
okay.
Is there an option
So
3?
these-
Is there a middle ground between these two
That's all I'm
options?
asking.
grades if you're
Is it-
having-
It depends on how many lunches they have,
Well,
so.
right, to have
This
only
is
3
why-
lunches,
Yeah.
or have only 2 lunches
He's
instead of
basically
6
thinking
lunches.
this
Yeah,
option
they-
right now.
they'll probably go to
Yeah, that's all
3
I'm
at
asking,
that
yeah.
point,
Yeah.
or maybe
From what I
even
understand,
4.
I don't see how art's on
Typically, we
cards.
see 3 to 4 in
Well,
middle
I
school.
agree with that.
The
And I was
difference
trying
is
to-
we don't do that art
So
expansion.
because I think
And we do
easier-
a double
I don't think we have questions.
It's
classroom
somewhat-
addition, you'll see that
One more
here,
room.
and so it's the classroom and then
You
the
know, to
art
get
room,
that art, you know, because it's
and then the
actually
classroom
in music
and,
space.
You can't see
the
it,
gym
Ray's talking so
there.
loud, I can't hear
It's
myself.
hot in here. So essentially, the biggest difference
You're
is
going
the
into
first
music.
one will address
So you
the
have
undersized
to
music
have
programs.
Add a music
The
class
second one
to
does
that,
not.
to be
But
that.
they both address the cafeteria.
So it would
Well,
not be.
it does
art.
not expand the cafeteria at the 7th,
Neither one does.
because we're taking.
That
the
where on
whole
option
grade
2
level.
also says it does not address the future enrollment projections.
Yes.
That means
Isn't the
also the
middle
classroom aspects of the building, right? Not just
Isn't the middle school has like the cafeteria, the music classroom, and then a very
Yeah.
It moves the
narrow
12 classrooms that are currently in the portables into the
That the
building.
middle school.
just basically just moves to 6th
Down
grade.
that hallway
Yeah.
where the art is and the music.
It is, yeah.
So does it leave the music classroom and then that half room or what?
Seems like it's pretty much meaning stage right now.
It's a much smaller.
Yeah, it leaves that as is in option 2.
So I found the chart for
Yeah.
7-8, and 7-8 max enrollment's 600, so it would actually be lower than where they're at today.
There's more that we
600,
wanna comment on.
yeah.
But does anybody think we really come back? I don't think we said 15 minutes. It's-
I know, it's gonna move quick.
Although I think
You can't have performances there anyway.
one thing for the insulation and air conditioning, they broke them out separately.
You could
I would really be
But
against putting in
you
air
can only take
conditioning
that
without
one
dealing with the
music
insulation.
Agreed. In
Yeah.
option 1.
I agree with that.
Crazy.
If we're gonna do
Don't
one,
move
we
that out,
are
we're using that stage right now.
the insulation and then the air conditioning. Yeah, exactly.
So then you know with option
We were supposed to talk about.
Portable air conditioning unit with a roll to the appropriate classrooms.
No, that's good, we didn't know, that was the
At
top
one
one.
point anyway.
The next one was,
Some areas.
Insulation for me.
There he is. Yeah.
I don't think you're gonna improve efficiency by 50%.
I'll do what I'm told.
I think what you have to take like kind of in consideration too is when you have less insulation, like your boilers, your chillers, everything that's HVAC related is working harder. So like the longevity of those systems also take a hit, which like to replace a boiler, $250,000, $500,000, like it, you know, everything is kind of relative, so you're not just looking at.
unless you can like leave the gutty, like the wall.
I'm trying to look at holistic
Yeah.
Does anybody think there's an argument that that's a compromise point, where primary schools don't have to be air conditioned?
Sure, it's just 768 square feet.
I mean, honestly,
This side of Paul
did away with,
and this.
given the number of IEPs that are air conditioned dependent, I don't see that as a great
Insulation
investment.
degrade over time. I know nothing about my
All
shop.
the time. I've never seen that in my 15 years of teaching, I've never once saw IEP that has air conditioning.
50%,
We're
I'm telling
talking
you,
one
it doesn't necessarily.
It's
So
There's too many conversation. I can't hear you.
Or is it just for IEPs?
Do you think that we're not really getting to what compromises up till
All the
now?
modern
I don't mean us, I mean the
things, all
whole
the
process.
construction areas.
I mean, this is one that you might say when you cut it down, it's a small number relatively, but when we come down to it, it may be one of the things we have to give up.
Rather than having multiple sidebar.
Particularly
Like, focus
for
on
people who are in favor of the primary, the neighborhood schools. That might, well, to keep that, maybe we have to give this up, although a lot of those options are less expensive than the new schools already.
But the answer I had was my only observation is it depends on the type of insulation.
Yeah.
So if you look at modern construction, they're using a lot of that rigid foam.
No, that's a good,
stuff, all barriers, so forth. The stuff that's in our schools, that you have to use,
AC, I go back.
I don't know if you blow in the foam stuff that hardens up, or if you just use bat, I don't know. But
We had priced actually doing rigid on the outside
Yeah.
and then doing new sheathing.
I do
inside.
agree that
That allows us to have insulation, but can you still take the seams?
I agree.
Yeah, barrier, right, yeah.
And is that
So are we talking at all
Yes.
about heat pumps?
We get a higher amount value or a
I
and so we don't have to go out.
Good grade, you won't absorb moisture. That's the other thing, when
I
you
mean,
have bat
how
and
is that
fluffy insulation,
back
you
up
have a
with
leak, it gets
insulation?
wet. And it has to come out for you to get going.
Once it gets wet, it loses its insulative quality.
You're still needing
Quality of life
insulation.
issues
Correct.
in the schools.
Larry.
I'm gonna say, we can help Todd over.
Compared to,
Just talking in hand.
I think we
No, I
might
was just
just
asking in terms of heat pumps.
I grew up in Texas where everything's air conditioned, so
you still need
different problems, but
You still need to get it.
things
Well, I think-
last longer if they're
Alyssa
temperature
kind of said
controlled.
it.
You know,
If
you
you
come back
have-
from
I mean,
the
insulation
summer in
works both
September and
ways.
your stuff
If
has
you
mold
pull
on
air
it
in
because there's no
or
airflow,
pull
there's
air
no,
out during hot
it's,
season.
you know, it's just like,
Yeah.
you're gonna preserve and save so
I mean, I
much
think
money by having a
arguments
better
can be made
quality
either way,
building
so
that
why one's
preserves
more important.
the materials that are in there,
You know,
the equipment
I
that's in
understand
there.
taxpayer
You know,
dollar
you don't
less
want
saving,
expensive
you know,
printers and computers
money out the
around
window.
in super hot summer
but I
weather
also
and in
like
super
thinking
cold
of the
weather over the
days,
winter, it's just, it just doesn't make
kids in
sense
those classrooms, and it's just-
not to
it's hard
build a
to
building
work.
that's gonna
And
take
there's
care
been
of the
multiple
stuff
buildings in
inside
lecture
and the people
You've
inside.
not seen
And your building's gonna have so much more value to use
my guess
for
is it's
cost.
probably not.
You can charge people in the summer or whenever if you have a comfortable building.
You know,
Nobody's gonna wanna rent a hot,
Yeah, I mean,
air conditioned gym that, you know, cafetorium, gymnasium, whatever we're calling
Well,
it.
I would just ask you this question, for all of you who go to work in an office building year round. Just ask yourself this
but
question,
like, you know, I
in
mean,
July,
I walk into the
85 or
classroom
90
and they're
if your office didn't have
hotter
any,
than they
would you wanna go to work there and
learn
work for
science.
Maybe if you're from Texas, you wouldn't mind.
No, it's still hot.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking like,
And it comes
talking
down
$3
to
million,
way back.
130. I think it's a no-brainer. It would be a mistake if we don't.
And how much
It'd be a huge mistake.
major renovations
And then
versus minor
to like the
renovations.
mechanical upgrades, right? Like,
Is there anything in that that
I
could
wouldn't
change?
even say do
The fact that
if you're not
we
gonna
are
do
changing
the
some
installation,
classrooms
Don't
because
don't
they
even do the mechanical.
Correct, that's what I
Like
was
they're
standards.
just burning
they go together.
They go together.
You're-
1,000 square feet.
One goes in the other.
And
So we're looking
and then
at
it
pretty much
messes up
6
the ratio of
13.
teachers to,
to.
you know.
But when we broke it down by school, Sue, I feel like we did kind of, Harriman did really kind of optimize that and
yeah, cause
only
they took a lot
touched,
of the 1,000
yeah,
out into.
and made those the new additions and then left the ones inside, like cause I think we did, that did really escalate the cost at one point, but I think that that's been,
What that would be.
Yeah, I think that was in their
I think
first
that was taken
round.
down, that's why A and B dropped.
yeah, I
Because
agree.
those are now like first classrooms.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
it's basically
Which I think they're still
twice as
undersized, but they
expensive
try like
to run the
40
K2s as it is to run one.
feet, it's not by like
Per square foot, cost per
Yeah.
square foot.
And quality of life.
But to your point, Sue, I don't,
You know, it's,
I mean,
it's 3 million for this and 3 million for that and 4.5 million for this, and it just, like I said, we know we're looking at a $26 million renovation, and I don't know that we can get back to
medical
$15 million
situations that you have to put them in places that already have an air conditioner,
something goes
affordable, or you have to get a room portable air conditioner that we've had, Todd's brought in. They set up in one room and that makes the room safer for the students. You know, it just doesn't make sense to limit yourself with not doing it.
These are not extravagant.
I don't know that that's
These are,
I don't either.
sort of like do it the right way.
But I did hear Harriman say that doing renovations has a short life. So why would we think about renovations? I think that was part of the task.
It is obvious, Annalee, but we need
Trying to find safe.
The survey results are
People
very
love
good.
those things, I'm right, I'm trying to do everything I can.
Maybe the finish.
Yeah, we have the people
Yeah,
I wouldn't,
Well, the missing factor in that is still the operating cost. That's gonna be, I mean,
There'd be like any other.
I don't know what I'm gonna do there.
I struggle with that. We're gonna spend $100 million, $130 million and fix 60-year-old schools. That just doesn't.
Which, as a reminder, because I know that, having been talking.
Department of Energy got canceled.
Education, we don't even need to talk about it. Education, we all not have to worry about it, oh, you'll send them to homeschool your kids.
Providing more options.
Can I switch the topic to the alternative / hybrids?
We will have to get our numbers before this.
So I think for me, one of the big downsides of option A was that it seemed to expand on the current footprints and then, you know, take up
There's certain things that can be surmised.
outdoor space.
You say option A.
Just option A, yeah, just regular option A.
The original option A, okay.
So now when I look at the hybrids and the alternatives, many of them actually increase
Why I think we should have a consolidated option versus a.
I think that's what we're doing.
I keep saying that, but people are
it makes me
thinking, well,
think
maybe we
that
have two
the
different options.
the
I just
impact
don't see
on
why we
outdoor
did
space
that.
is gonna be even worse. So I was, and I tried to find like the diagrams for that, but there's so many I understand why you wouldn't put them there. I was just curious what your thoughts on that.
We didn't diagram all of these because it was literally
Yeah, it's too much,
direction as to what to move forward,
Yeah.
but the only
So
one
I
we
think
diagrammed.
the last one is the deferral on the middle school and Wentworth school.
That's where I'm most confused.
Alright, say that again, Larry.
So some of these, so like.
From what
the
Charlie said, we're gonna
hybrid,
kind of vote tonight on whether or
Some
not
of
we're
those
gonna.
existing were like almost 200 to 250
Yeah.
for the existing, and we're taking them, they're probably, if you look at that option, let's go to that dashboard for a second. You have 287 at Blue Point, 255 considered numbers. So yes, there was an increase, but not.
It's like within 10%.
And then the new school was 300, so we're generally saying, it's generally they're about the same size, you know, there might be a small difference, so it's not a big increase from what you saw in option A.
Now, with these hybrids, and these new options, that you presented, those are all still removing all of the portables at these local schools.
Yes.
What
So you
type of heat
actually
pump are you
get
guys
some
talking about
space,
anyway? Like
even
a
if you
residential
do-
heat pump?
I mean, 8
Well,
kilometers, you're gonna go.
I don't know, like,
Playground,
if
everything,
you
you
have
gotta.
But we don't, I wanna be clear, we're not going up with the existing.
Yeah.
Right, you're going out and then up,
Yeah.
but you still have
Okay.
playground space because there's
Correct.
more there.
It's like a home.
But it would also open
It's
up
like
Pleasant Hill and Blue
like
Point,
$7,000
more
each.
playground space as
That
well.
sounds really
Yeah,
expensive for
you'd
a
have to
classroom.
have, you'd have to have more.
Where did we get that?
Every day,
Yeah.
he's have something that he's trying to get every day.
So it's about the same that you would have had on that option.
Two options, one is
But as far
we
as
put them in a
not
portable,
expanding all.
or you
I don't think
buy
Pleasant Hill is
a
any
floor
big
or a massive window unit
I mean,
and
8 corners,
create
yeah, you want
electrical
wind.
breakers holes while
The other
it's
ones are
turning
so
away.
tight right now.
I'm sorry, what was
So
the
much
debt?
parent conflict.
Oh,
Can you
I
explain
guess how
again,
they
sorry, I know you said it before, why in the hybrids you close Pleasant Hill, but in the alternatives you close
Okay.
eight corners?
Yeah, that-
Four holes this year.
So,
They got the air conditioning.
The hybrid was an option that
Go
came
to
from
Lowe's
this
and buy
school,
some massive
and then we
thing,
were asked
plug
to
it in and tell
close
the
eight,
teacher, do
close
not
Pleasant
turn on that
Hill,
lamp
new one.
because your
I think
breaker's gonna
in
kill
their
you.
minds, there was a
That's the
site
truth.
that
So were there,
exactly-
were there 4 IEPs
Yeah.
in
So
Blue
that's why
Point
that
that
looked at that, and
necessitated
the other
AC?
ones, we didn't
look at
non-AC classes.
Parents and doctors,
Like we're
they
level
don't
up to do
it's kind of like
instead
extended
of
hours,
like,
specialties.
I was thinking about
consider
this one
the corners there,
Once parents figure it out, they get
They
their
want
doctor
that
recommendation,
accommodation.
and the
So
doctors
do
will
you
let
guys
them know.
just
the other
hear that?
thing too is those
So there's our schools are more than
kind of integrated into
but
neighborhoods and
those,
corners is
some of the students
It
are
can be grouped
already
together.
in
Some
your
special
position area.
the logic behind the way.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Could,
The other thing is,
could A
for,
be,
for
Yep.
like going to art,
with closing one of the other schools instead?
we have the air conditioning, the art.
Yeah, yeah,
rooms,
absolutely.
These
So
children,
that's
IEPs are
probably
really
really
hard.
Least restrictive
There's a
environment.
full group.
Does that mean you
It's
have
not
to AC a
based
gym?
only on,
Yeah, I mean, you
have
could,
that potential.
Oh, okay.
We
So
can't
on
buy
the
some lots of
could be applied to.
So that's like, okay.
It's a different learning environment, you don't need the AC for. One of the things that.
Let's wrap it up in a couple minutes. Come back to the. What was the last question we were working on?
Deferring the question around, should we defer either middle school or Wentworth scope? It's like making a decision that we're gonna apply that across all the options, I think.
Number one.
So our challenge to that is because it's so maybe harder to get up to that area.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, B1A was amazing, I just don't think you get 540 kids.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
You get 540 kids at 8 corners.
But using our sixth grade in those formats.
Well, I don't think that it's far enough away that there's a big benefit to deferring. I think actually if you're gonna do that, we just shouldn't do it, because a lot of those things are built around the bubble. And maybe there's temporary solutions, like Sue was saying, about that bubble, both through Wentworth and the middle school.
So that's the expansion.
Defer, it's just gonna add more money to the
I don't know, it'd be great if they did, but I remember even
which is a risk kid.
Well, it's different, that's the one that has to be.
Where we all.
I don't know that I
So I just looked at the same research. And I just focused on
Yeah, of all the nights. Yeah.
Any owners, takers?
I'll have the phone.
Yeah.
Credit cards? All right, are we all back? All right, so let's, I think let's just open it up for discussion, kind of some themes that you guys heard, or think there's any big findings or thoughts?
I'll speak for group 3. I think we had a consensus of, talking about innovation and mechanical upgrades. I think they go hand in hand. And, talking, what was it, like $3 to $10 million or something? It's a no-brainer.
With both of them.
Sure.
What was that?
The general consensus from group 3 was we do both of them. It would be a mistake to not do both.
The insulation.
Mechanical installation. Okay.
If you do the insulation, that doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
Very complicated.
So I guess one thing that was posed in group 2 was you wouldn't do AC without insulation, but would you insulate without AC?
Say that again?
So you wouldn't AC without insulation, but would you insulate without AC? So you protect against the Maine winter coming in the school, but you don't cool.
recommended that be?
Yeah, I think, I'll let anybody from Group One speak. I think we kind of built consensus around it, the way things, the climate change and things like that, and understanding how the schools are put together, both AC and insulation ought to be included.
Yeah.
I don't.
We can actually bring this up with that, there's also maybe an equity thing between the options, where if you're gonna be making a comparison between keeping neighborhood schools or building consolidated version or something, anything new you build is gonna have the AC. And so is it fair to look at it that, as you're making those comparisons, that if you're gonna upgrade the existing schools, that it should have the AC so that that factor is comparable across everything?
Yeah.
One thing I appreciated Todd kind of flagged for our group was that primary schools are kind of at their max if they're tell me if I'm saying this wrong, no you. But the major electrical systems would all need to be upgraded at those 3 primary schools in order to support. Yes, Eric?
Well, I think that,
Eric, okay.
I think that was part of the scope of the work with the initial look-see by Harriman.
Yeah. That had been part of the, okay.
You made a great point about kind of how, as we move forward through the, I don't want to steal your thunder, would you share that with me?
Particularly de-scoping now.
Yeah.
So you talked about how we have another survey coming up and we have an option or the opportunity to share costs. And so if we start de-scoping significantly now, we can't add that back in after the survey comes back. However, the survey comes back when we provide costs and everyone says this is still way too expensive, we can then start looking at de-scoping, but you can't go both ways.
Yeah, true.
So maybe start with the high number and ask how would you make this cheaper, and like have these different de-scoping things in the survey so that people would have an idea of what the trade-off would be.
Exactly. Yeah, so I mean, like, if we say we're not doing insulation and AC right now, and the survey goes out with that information, and then we can't go back after the people have given us the ammunition to narrow down to one option and say, oh yeah, but we're gonna add insulation and survey and insulation and AC back in. That kind of comes to the transparency and accountability issues that we've received from a feedback perspective.
And the survey could be designed around these kind of defined scoping pieces. So you don't really have to scrap a number, but you can really start to test appetite of the voters around the different pieces that you're talking about.
Exactly, and particularly if we do end up going with 2 very similar options, which is what we're going to take the results from the first survey, as gospel, and those options are probably going to look pretty similar. And I know there's an appetite as well to go with, one consolidated and one neighborhood. However, at that point, if we don't get what we've already received from the community, consolidated is going to get slapped down unless communication about long-term cost savings, all the good things that this committee can see with consolidation. Because I think the perception of consolidation out there now is still that $165 million project that failed. Because we didn't give any cost information, so everyone sees more or less the same thing come back up again. They're automatically going to think that that's the price tag on it.
The other thing that you mentioned in our group was you pointed out that heating, cooling, and insulation was like something that the people in the survey had strong support for. And so why would we not include it if that was something that our community has been very clear as a priority?
Exactly, that was the number 2 highly supported issue from the 10 questions. And Charlie made a great point about that's what people know, right? Like they have their houses and you want to expound on that a little bit.
No, I was just sharing, I think that things like, air conditioning and insulation, homeowners understand that. They don't maybe necessarily understand educational priorities as much, and so you ask them, what's the most important things, right? Code, make sure my house is up to code. I know that's something I gotta do at home. The building's ought to be, I understand heat and air, right? And so they perhaps prioritize the things they understood. So it was just an observation. I did want to ask, the Harriman crew, it's in, insulation and AC is in right now as an add optional, right? In the scope or in the?
It's as an ad alternate, just we did that, so we would have a number to be able to talk about.
So, so there's, to his point, right, there's no reason we can't keep it in and then de-scope it if we choose, right? If we start looking for cost savings measures down the road. Well, then just to keep us moving, I'll present a motion to include AC and insulation in whatever options we choose at this point, moving forward, and then with the understanding that we could potentially de-scope from there.
Second.
Let me call the vote. Oh yeah, discussion, any further discussion on it? Okay. Larry Kane.
Yes.
Leroy.
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Fred.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Sue.
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
Jenna.
Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
Carrie.
Yes.
Charlie. Yes. Melissa.
Yes.
Jim.
Yes.
Annalee.
Yes.
April.
Yes.
Ava.
Yes.
Jillian.
Yes.
Elizabeth.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Thank you. Middle school options?
I think we definitely need to address the cafeteria issue. I mean, Harriman has told us most schools of the Department of Education, where the guidelines are for lunches, we're going to, we can't have kids eating lunch at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and hopping on the bus, or kids eating at 10:30 and have dietary concerns because they're hungry by the time they get to 12 o'clock. And I don't know if we really need the stage in that building. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's utilized greatly at this point. I mean, any concerts, things are all moved to either the high school or wherever.
I'd put a spin on that. I think there's 2 different options. There's a 6th grade and a 7th grade. For 6th grade, I think you and Michael earlier kind of made great points that you need to address the cafeteria. I think 7th grade is a little bit a different question, and we can probably talk about that.
Yeah, because that addresses it because you're taking a grade out. So if we go with that, you're getting back down to, I asked Lisa, you're getting back down to your 3 or 4 lunches again because you're taking a whole grade out. So if we don't get down to that, and we go 6, 7, 8, you've got to address the
And I think max enrollment for the 7th or 8th right now is projected around 600, which is less than the current number, so.
Is the cafeteria in the middle school used for anything else other than lunch?
The cafeteria currently at the middle school is used for lunch, and a section of it is used for, by the music department for lessons. And we do have chorus in there also, I believe 2 periods a day. Yes.
Which is where the option 1 for the 7-8 provides the improved music spaces to alleviate that congestion.
Right.
And then we don't have to expand the cafeteria as much as we take the grade. I think it still probably needs to be expanded a little bit.
You could take over the stage.
Yeah.
Stage, just to be clear, it's just a little wider than this table.
Right.
Yeah.
This way.
It's not gonna give you
Okay,
a lot
not this
by
way.
any means. Might get 10 to 20 students in there.
This might be a stupid question, but was with the charge that we were tasked with, was this scope included in that charge?
K to 8. K to 8.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I make a motion that middle school, we accept option A.
I'm sorry, option 1.
Option 1.
Thank you for both AB and CDG.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll second that to move it forward to discussion.
Okay. So the motion on the floor for discussion is to move forward with with any of the options or alternate options, utilizing middle school options 1 for AB and 1 for CD and G. Yep, open for discussion.
So, perfectly aligned for 6 through 8, option 1. What's the difference between 1 and 2 for the 7 through 8?
The improved music spaces. So you have an addition there that provides improved music spaces, so essentially,
Is there no music in the second?
there is, but it is a, not an adequately sized music space, which is why the discussion happens in the cafeteria, the chorus happens in the cafeteria. So this would add an addition to right side of the music program as an addition.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Is there, for A and B, is there a middle ground that isn't on here, the option 3-4? That is option 2 that somehow addresses the cafeteria? I know that's probably much too broad, but.
No, I think what you're saying, the challenge is that we need to move the music program and create interior space to enlarge that cafeteria without doing the addition to the music program out, which is one of the bigger differences between the two options. It's hard to strike a middle ground. We might be able to move one of the music programs and have a complete opposite end of the school, which doesn't work well for any combined efforts that they have going on. Nothing comes to mind that there's a in between the two.
And for CD and G, on that side, I mean, you're looking at 6, 7 million. It's not a huge difference, but.
Well, we could separate these where you're looking on the options for E and B, to your point that James, is that the one with just 2 grades could be a separate decision from the 1 to 3 grade.
You can absolutely split the question.
The other thing,
I don't have a strong opinion on it.
the other thing we discussed with A1 is that we would exempt the 3.5 million for carpet, paint, all that.
For which one, Jim?
Option A1.
A1.
A, option 1.
Gotcha.
Did you say carpet paint?
Carpet,
we
comma,
could-
paint.
Oh.
Carpet
He
paint.
saw it on TikTok.
It's a new art class.
Great examiner, Shark Tank last week?
So,
They do make
so
carpet.
same question on this, so to the earlier point that, it's, we de-scope now, it's hard to add scope back in, but perhaps we could do it down the road. But for this option, it strikes me that as we move into more of a granular design phase after this, you really need an answer on this one. This isn't something we can go back and
This
forth
we need
on.
an answer on because it's gonna really change how we approach the design for middle school.
Right.
Adding in or subtracting 3.4 million for finishes, it's numbers on page essentially at this point. This affects the design.
So,
Should we split the question?
Would you like to make a motion?
Make a motion to split the question.
Yes, I would like to make a motion to split the question.
Second.
Second. Sue? you got that? Jason? Yeah, okay. All right, so there's a new motion on the table to split the question. So we'll vote on middle school options for A and B, and then a second vote for middle school options for C, D, and G. All in favor?
Discussion
Oh,
first.
yes, thank you, discussion, sorry.
I'm having a real problem with, once we commit to $41 million for the middle school, that leaves, I mean, if we go forward with a proposal that's, 130 million, or anywhere between 100 and 130, we are risking, I mean, it really limits what we can do with the elementary schools if we take this 41 million.
Point of order, the discussion is supposed to be on whether or not we are gonna split the question.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna come back, you're
We can go back.
You go first.
Yeah. Thanks. So any discussion on
What?
splitting the question?
What is the split?
To vote on
A, B.
A, B, then C, D, and G.
Yeah.
Yes. No discussion. We'll try a show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes unanimous, thank you. All right, so we'll start with A and B. So now the motion is, we're open for discussion on A and B. Sue?
And I think the difference in the cost, 20 or 40 million, and just deciding right now that we're going with the more expensive, the 41 million, we've really kind of handcuffed. I mean, that means that the cost savings that we need to achieve for the other part of the project is that much greater. And I'm having a hard time, I guess I need to study this a little bit more to really understand how there could be that much of a difference between the two.
Yeah, I mean, the size of that addition is a lot bigger. So that's the major difference between these.
So we've discussed that music is going in the new edition. What else is going in there? Can you remind us?
The whole 6th grade.
12 classrooms.
12 classrooms in 6th grade, your music, 3 music rooms, your PE classrooms, all the support spaces to go with that, mechanical bathroom storage, special education.
Is there an elevator?
Yeah, elevator, stairs. So then option 2 is just the 6th.
And it's 1 story versus 2 stories.
Correct, 1 story versus 2 stories. And it's just the 6th grade at today's enrollment, not the future.
So that you're gonna take 12 portables and replace them with how many classrooms?
12.
So we're getting 12 classrooms with both.
No, not with both. So the last one, you have more than 12 classrooms.
More than
because
12.
there's an increase in enrollment. And you're having the special education spaces here that have, some of them had to be relocated for some of the programming. And you get we have the PE classroom out there, we have music spaces, so there's a difference in the size of that addition due to those music and increased enrollment.
So really, we're talking about 20 million for, yeah, it's a 20 million difference between 12 classrooms or enough classrooms for the high increased enrollment, and we deal with the cafeteria. So, sorry, your hand's been up for a while.
Yep. Sure. So I'm going to push back a little bit on that. You used an interesting term there, handcuffed. And if we keep the middle school 6 to 8, and we add 300 students and we don't address the cafeteria, handcuffing is exactly what you're going to be doing to the school and their resources. And I would ask, what is your solution for providing enough lunches and enough lunch period and enough lunch spaces to an additional 300 students? We're not talking about, well, maybe we can increase class size by 1 or 2 students to get everybody in there. We're talking about an almost 50% increase in the amount of students you have to service. So what is the solution for feeding all of those kids?
I don't have an answer. But I mean, can we, I don't know.
So I guess I would feel a lot better about voting for option one, if between now and next week, there can be some additional thought put into how can we reduce the cost of that.
You talking like 10 million?
Yeah, I think 10 million makes a difference, makes a huge difference. $10 million here and there makes a huge difference.
I agree. I would be in favor of tabling A and B and trying to look at what are the solutions that are somewhere in between and address the cafeteria.
Right.
Just remember, like $10 million isn't let's buy the quarters in the couch.
right?
Well, no, I understand that, but not at all.
What if you bring the bottles back?
But what we are talking about, but what we are talking about is adding a cafeteria versus music. That's, I don't know, maybe that's $10 million. I have no idea.
I'm with you. We all want easy choices, but it's getting to be crunch time. And I think maybe we can put a high end and we can say Z-scope, like, do you want to try music for 10 million? You know, but
they're saying that these.
They're saying they can't do that.
It's not really possible, if we go with this plan, option one, it's.
It depends what your trade-offs are. If you don't wanna address future enrollment projections, yeah, we can de-scope option one and maintain the increased cafeteria.
Do you have any ballpark on that?
No, I'm not. So, I mean, we can go back and look at these, but there's gonna be trade-offs. To get the scope that we're talking about right there, that's generally what that's gonna be. It's based on the square foot add of space for that program, and that's what it's costing per square foot. We can go back and we can come back and tell you this is what you can consider not doing to bring the number down from 41. I'm hearing the cafeteria is critical for the 6-8 enrollment. Therefore, it needs to be some version of one that has some reduction. So we can go back and study that.
So motion to table?
Sure. Motion to table the split first option.
A and B.
A and B.
So the motion on the floor now is to table this pending.
Table is not debatable.
Right, but he's
Just statement, so to table this and give Harriman a chance to relook at option one to see if there's other opportunities to keep the cafeteria and perhaps rescope and reduce some cost out of option one.
Point of clarification. If we were to accept this, and then we were later looking at cost reduction opportunities, we're not bound to this in any way, shape, or form. Like, we could have them be researching this after accepting it, and then potentially cutting those things later, right? So like, we could pass whatever we're gonna pass, and then ask them as a task on your list, homework, to just price out where opportunity for cost cutting would be, and then address those later.
I mean, I think that's a question for, right, that was kind of my earlier question was, once we make this.
But wait, but is that true? Like, that was a point of clarification for me.
Yeah, I think that's true.
You can always cut more, you just can't
Yeah.
add back.
Okay, thank you.
So, I'm trying to stick to the rules, we can't debate on a motion to table, but if you have a question for clarification, I think you can ask.
Pass.
Point of clarification,
Can I
to a date certain, or are we gonna leave it open?
To next week.
Next week. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Joe.
To a date certain, or are we gonna leave it open?
Table it to next week.
Next week. Let's come back with the information so that you guys can make it informed.
Did you have a question for the group?
That was good.
Okay. All right, so I'll call the vote again, because I don't know what this one's gonna be now.
Can you restate what the motion is so that everyone's clear?
The motion is to table the vote on, to select between options, middle school options 1 and 2 for school solution options A and B until next week.
What's the point of clarification?
Yep.
It depends on what you guys want for your vote next week in regards to a summary of information. What option are we putting in with these options? Can't find the word. What middle school option do you want us to use in that summary?
Because next week's big elimination.
So to the earlier point of, if you were to put the 41 and we came back and said, hey, here are some potential things to consider, you would have the full you would have option A with the 41 million, and you'd say, here are some things to consider, and somebody could make a motion to accept option 1 with whatever reductions we come back with. I'm just trying to think of how we simplify the information for people to think about it next week.
So I'll withdraw them, based on that, I'll withdraw my motion to table. And understanding to Alyssa's point that passes, it doesn't lock us in anything. We always make the changes that Harriman comes up with.
Okay, have to withdraw the second.
Oh, I can withdraw the second.
Motion's off the table, we're back to deciding between options 1 and 2 with the understanding that there's potentially an opportunity to reduce costs through scope reductions. And for A and B only, that's what's on there. There's no further discussion, we're gonna call the vote on that.
So what are people voting on?
We are voting to move forward for options A and B, middle school options 1 or 2.
Well, what are they voting
I'm
on,
sorry,
1 or 2?
we're voting on 1.
Just one.
We're voting for 1.
Yeah, that was the motion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. Larry Kane.
Yes.
Leroy.
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Tom. Asher. Yes. Fred.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Sue.
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
Jenna.
Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
Carrie.
Yes.
Charlie's yes. Alyssa.
Yes.
Jim.
Yes.
Allie.
Yes.
April.
Yes.
Ava. Jillian.
Yes.
Elizabeth.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. A and B will move forward with option 1. Now on the table, on the floor is options C, D, and G, options 1 or 2. Discussion?
No, the motion was
Was
option
option
1.
1, to move forward with option 1, thank you. Discussion. Okay, no discussion? We will.
So you have to go with all 3 as a package, is that the deal?
Essentially, those options apply to all 3. And so,
Because those are the 7th and 8th grade option proposals.
And the motion is?
to move forward with option 1. Not hearing any discussion.
Did you ever get a second? Second.
Yeah.
It was Jim's first motion that got supported.
Where are we? We're great, you guys doing great.
All right, we'll call the vote. Larry?
No.
Leroy?
Yes.
James?
No.
Tom?
Yes.
Fred?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Rob? Yes. Sue?
No.
Dave?
Yes.
Jenna?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Sorry, was that a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Carrie?
Yes.
Charlie? I'm gonna yes. Alyssa?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Allie?
No.
April?
Yes.
Ava? Jillian?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
Motion passes 16-4. Double check my calendar.
Yeah, we're right.
No.
Yes, I counted it as 3 minutes.
Thanks. Okay. Before,
Definitely.
alternatives. Yeah, I think before we dive into deferment, 'cause I think there's opportunity to talk about that. We don't have to make those decisions now. I think we do have to decide which alternative options move forward for next week. Thank you.
Go one by one. And that's which if any, right?
Which if any?
It's not a forced choice list.
Correct.
So you need a motion.
Need a motion to move forward with any of these.
So we need a motion to move forward with any one of those.
Yes.
Okay, well. Okay, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, let's go ahead, Ted.
Yes.
Okay, so if I'm understanding the procedure here about what you're asking us to do, and just tell me if I'm out of order here, but my motion is to strike options A and B as options altogether, and to insert as a new option for this committee to consider would be the hybrid of A and B based on option A.
I think that's what you're asking.
So you just asked us to move forward one of these.
But his motion though, right? Yeah, that's in order. His motion would be to move forward with option ABA to replace options A and B.
Right, and for aesthetics, to make it option A. Second. And can I speak on my behalf?
Yeah, so the motion was made and seconded. Open for discussion.
Discussion, I thought that we had aligned as a whole aspect that we would cut down options next week. And so I don't think we should eliminate any of the 5 options today. Maybe we can add some, but I don't think we were prepared to have that vote today. So that's why I would say no.
As a name clarification, I love the idea of simplicity, but for the community bringing along, we may want to leave it as A-B, just so people can see the flow and not suddenly kind of be following graphics and then be like, why does A suddenly look different? But that's just a side note.
Could we just kind of take the pulse of where everybody is on these and have a vote? Like, how many people think that number 1 up there is the best, or it does that kind of thing? And maybe there are some up there that we can just throw out right now. Because
So this is exactly what I wanted to have happen, okay? Like, we have not been having discussions to whittle things down. So the reason why I proposed this motion was to have a singular conversation on this one topic, and we wouldn't get distracted by anything else. So this is the moment for you to have that. For us to have that discussion, you know what I'm saying?
Just on ABA replacing A and B.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, right, we have to stay on the.
But that's the whole point of this. Yeah.
Alright, for discussion's sake, I feel like building a new school 2 times larger than the other, so option B is gonna be pretty big.
Are you talking about AB?
A, B, B.
Well, we have to just.
So the motion is to make
Oh,
it
it's ABA.
Yep.
Oh my god. Got it now.
Yeah, so go ahead. Point of clarification on this, right? So if we vote in favor of this motion, right, the implication, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't also move forward any of the other alternates in here, right? So you're not voting for ABA in lieu of any of these other alternates. You're simply voting to move ABA forward and eliminate A and B.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So,
I have discussion.
Go ahead.
So I agree with James. I think people were not prepared to eliminate A and B. I would be in favor of moving ABA forward, but I'm not in favor of it replacing A and B today.
So we could vote no on this, and somebody may make a different motion
to just move ABA forward without eliminating the original A and B.
Or can we just split it the way we tried to split the last?
No, okay.
That's a good question, that's a good question.
Along the same lines as James and our councilwoman, I would encourage you to vote this motion down. I actually like the hybrid option, but we've been telegraphing to the community that next week is the week that we're gonna be reducing these options. We have a meeting tonight that's not even on Zoom. Now, granted, it's open and folks can join us, but if you're telling the community one thing, that you're gonna start narrowing these options and eliminating things on a date, and then you start doing things a date earlier and not opening up for Zoom, I think that's problematic for the community. So I think I ultimately would support that idea, but I just don't think tonight's the night for it.
Other discussion?
Yeah, I didn't think we were gonna vote either, because I was showing Jim, I had gone through here and said, this is yes, no, and it's not, that isn't the choices I was given for tonight. So I'm not really ready to vote, so I don't know whether voting neither is appropriate. I mean, you're not supposed to do that without a reason, but that's fine.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm totally amenable to amend the motion, and that amendment would be to simply add a new option, and that option would be AB, a hybrid of AB based on A.
Fred, can you withdraw your first motion?
Oh, I have to withdraw first?
And
Okay.
we can amend your original motion, we have to vote on the
Okay.
amendment. It's easier
All
to
right.
just withdraw and then.
I guess I was thinking out loud. All right, so I will withdraw my motion. Do I need to state the name of the motion?
No, sorry, hold on, Ms. Brown.
Jim?
Then do you withdraw your second?
Your second.
We'll still have the debate, Jim.
We believe in you.
Yeah, I'll withdraw.
Okay.
50%.
Hey, no peer pressure in this room, guys, no peer pressure. All voices are equal. Okay, so we are open to any new motions.
True. I thought we had to vote. So new motion. I'd like to introduce a new option, and that option shall be called hybrid AB based on B, based on A.
So the motion, is there a second?
Second.
For clarification, that is the first one at the top.
Yes.
Yes.
Right
Yeah.
top, at the
The
very
motion
top.
is to move forward ABA for consideration next week, along with, as an official option that we were considering. Discussion.
Anybody second that?
I did.
Yeah, okay. No discussion?
I just have one concern about this option. I like the general concept of that, but this is moving the school to another location, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if we were to do that, and we are talking about something like pre-K, we would presumably look to put pre-K in one of the schools that is closed. Putting kids from Blue Point over at Pleasant Hill is like such a huge stretch. I'm not fond of that specific location. I don't know how to resolve that.
So in our group discussion, I asked Lisa that question. It doesn't depend on Pleasant Hill being the school that is closed.
Okay.
Correct.
Oh, so it's just closing one school?
But there's some nuance there,
Very
but.
clearly says
This option
It says that.
specifically said, well, for that dollar amount, this
Yeah.
option considers closing Pleasant Hill and increasing to that size. However, you could consider another option that closes any one of the other ones and builds a new school.
But the price might vary a little bit, right?
It's gonna vary a little bit because Pleasant Hill is the smallest footprint, and therefore we most likely can get it into the mid-twos, upper twos, close to 300, have 3 schools. So it would look a little different, but the specific question was asked, could we close any one of them and build them? Yes, you could, it would look slightly different.
So one of the benefits of this proposal is that by closing Pleasant Hill, they've done the work to try to even out
the enrollment among the three. And to me, that's very compelling compared to all the other proposals that are up here. And it responds to what came through very clearly in the survey, which is a strong desire to maintain 3 schools, not necessarily 4. And we're not gonna have the conversation about the sites yet, but there are various sites that could be considered, and that's part of where I was asking the question in terms of, does it have to be Pleasant Hill? And I think there's some flexibility there. For me, and I completely understand the question, I would feel comfortable moving this forward and then continuing to do the work to determine, based on sites that are available potentially, and also further work about which is actually the right one to close. To me, that work could continue down the line and it could change. I don't think we'd be locking ourselves into closing Pleasant Hill by moving this forward today.
You might need an amendment to essentially say close a school and build a new K-2 and make all 3 similar populations.
And that would be the goal, right?
Do we need to amend it then?
Could it just change later?
Yeah, I think I disagree procedurally. To Rob's point, these options continue to evolve and change. And as a committee, if we're careful and strategic with our changes, then we can communicate why we chose a different primary school later on down the line and not Pleasant Hill.
But
So
I think,
And a lot is gonna depend on sites,
that's okay.
yeah,
right? And
so,
we can't have that discussion in public.
yeah, but I think, so I hear what you guys are both saying, as long as in this committee, everybody understands, right? So I think that we just have to capture it very clearly in the minutes, that if we move this forward, it is with the caveat that, because it says very clearly, closes Pleasant Hill. And so we just need to make sure that we're clear amongst this group that if we move this forward, we're keeping that option open, that any one of the other 2 schools could replace Pleasant Hill.
Well, I'll say that, for me, makes it go from a yes vote to a no vote, because that's really too fuzzy.
Jim?
Question, we're gonna do that. Do all 3 schools have to be equal? We're gonna build a new school.
Yeah.
Couldn't we expand that and add extra classrooms to the new school?
That's ABE.
That's
ABE.
I think it's with the goal of equalizing or evening the enrollment
So,
among the
right.
group.
This original option came from this group, and the reason, and I don't want to speak for who brought it forward, that Pleasant Hill was because of its compact footprint and the inability to really be able to expand that too much, and have adequate play space. So that's why we were asked to look at that one. And I think somebody had in mind another site that could go. So if you were to change schools, yeah, could you? Absolutely, that could be an option. It's not gonna necessarily do that same cost.
So,
I'd like to make a motion.
What's that?
I'd like to make a motion.
There's already been a motion.
I'd like to amend the motion.
It's not your motion to amend, right?
He can make an
An
amendment.
amendment, yeah.
Okay.
We remove the reference to Pleasant Hill.
Say again?
Remove the reference to Pleasant Hill.
Close one of the schools.
Close one of the schools, correct.
Needs a second
Second.
discussion.
Do we have an understanding that the Pleasant Hill version is the worst case from a cost perspective?
We do not know that.
And I wouldn't, personally, I wouldn't vote for that.
Wouldn't
What do we
vote
do
for
if we, I
which
mean,
motion?
if we say closes a school and builds a new one, and then we get costs back and we eventually land on what school we wanna do, and that's over 113 million. Then what?
And you could go back
Then
to
you
Pleasant
vote
Hill.
to fail it.
Or
Yeah.
not take it.
Yeah, I'm not taking it.
I hear you.
their smallest school.
Which is also gonna make, if we want them to be equal, which seems to be part of the goal of this option, if you end up keeping Pleasant Hill, you won't have equal schools.
Even with this amendment though, it can still end up being less.
Right, right.
So I don't see a downside to just changing it to one of the 3 schools.
But does that need to be done through a motion though?
It's an amendment.
Oh, it's an amendment,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I'm for that, since it's already been proposed.
Larry seconded. I have a question for how this would impact what this looks like for next week, Lisa.
I'm sorry, say again?
I have a question for how this would impact what this looks like for next week. If we change the language to say closes Pleasant Hill, we can't put a price tag on it.
Can we say not to exceed the cost of ABB? And then, if that doesn't commit them to bring it in at that point, but it commits us to say, we're not interested anymore above that, so we'll go back to Pleasant Hill.
What's your ceiling?
ABB or ABA?
Well, no, what I mean is the cost, set a number,
That's the ceiling of the cost.
and the ceiling, I just chose ABB because that's 121, so. And maybe you don't wanna go that high, maybe you
Yeah,
wanna
maybe.
go 50.
You could put an can't, on a graphic like this, can't you just put an asterisk and say based on removing Pleasant Hill?
I mean, you could, but
Yeah, these numbers are also gonna go up 20 million, because we just voted to do option 1.
Yeah.
I move the question. I move the question.
We're voting on the amendment.
Yeah.
So Jim is moving the question, which is asking the chair to call the vote, which the vote is on Jim's amendment to change the language from closes Pleasant Hill to closes one of our primary schools.
Only that, not,
So we're voting to change the language. Larry?
Yes.
Leroy? No. James?
Sorry, Is this to remove Pleasant Hill and have an unnamed primary school?
yes.
No.
Hold on, that's 2 no's, 1 yes. No.
It's not over, it's not over.
You're a no. Got it. Fred?
Yes.
Paul?
No.
Rob?
Yes.
Sue?
No.
Dave?
No.
Jenna?
No.
Bill?
Yes.
Carrie?
No.
I'm a no. Alyssa?
No.
Jim?
Yes.
Annalee?
No.
April?
No.
Ava? Jillian?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
No.
The motion fails 14 to 6. Now we're back to the original motion to move forward ABA as presented, as written, to close Pleasant Hill.
Even though I want to change the language, I'm in favor of this option because a couple people have alluded to, and I asked a question earlier. There is a site available that can handle a smaller school, and that particular site is attractive to me for a number of reasons, and so that would be another factor in why I think it would be a good one to keep in the mix.
But again, we've already said, you gotta add 20 million to that number, right? It's all
All of them, it's all relevant.
But then we're 132 million.
So we're still under 130.
Right.
So,
Sue?
So this says that the new school would be, or that all three would be about 300 students.
A similar size.
What if we made, because every addition, every change we make on the two remaining schools impacts playgrounds, parking, that instead of making it 450, we just make the new school, I don't know, 350 or 375, some number that would allow you to keep the two remaining schools closer to, we're trying to save playground space. So I don't know what the right number is, but.
So we're not talking about an addition of 450 kids, we're looking at.
Right.
Yeah.
No, what she's, I don't wanna speak for you, but I think what you're saying is we can work within this option to build a new school that's maybe a little bit bigger so that your scope at the remaining two primaries is lower.
That's what B does.
Yeah, that's
But not as
That's
big
what
as
B
B.
does.
Yeah, right. But the 450 is just something, it's just a scary number for a lot of people. Like, I'd be okay with it, but I know that just based on the reaction of the people in this room, that 450 is too big.
But that can happen in design development, can't it? I mean, if this moves forward, you can adjust the scope of the work on the existing
New build is
schools.
at 300,
But
Blue Point's at 287, and Acorn's at 254. We can massage those numbers back and forth to a degree.
But starting with this one and continuing to work on it, as opposed to, the other ones seem like non-starters to me.
And the intent of this is not to have equity between the buildings, that was not the intent.
And to be clear, right, we can also move forward ADV. If people want to explore both of those options and have a week to study it and come back next week.
Right.
So it's not in place of the other 8 alternatives up there, whatever it is, right? We're just talking about A. And then we can also move forward any other option that people like.
Yeah. Also, just remember, there's also variability within our schools. One of our primaries has about 180 students and another one has about 250. So we can say there'll be 300 in each school, but we're not redistricting every year. So at some point, there's gonna be built-in variability based on where the kids live.
But going back to discussion, we have a motion for ABA, and if we want to do ABB, that's a separate motion, we discuss it later.
All right, I'm gonna call the vote. There's no further discussion. So we're voting to move forward with ABA as presented to the vote for next week. Leroy?
No.
I'm sorry, Larry?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Tom?
Yeah.
Fred?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Dave?
No.
Jenna?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Carrie?
No.
Charlie, yes. Alyssa?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Annalee?
Yes.
April?
Yes.
Ava? Jillian?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
Motion passes 17-3. You can make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to move forward, alternative version 3, bottom of the screen.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion is to move forward alternate version 3 for next week. So this is the K2 consolidated school, it's a smaller consolidated school than option D. This was presented from the survey. This
Yeah,
was
the survey.
first suggested through the survey. Discussion?
So, from a communication standpoint, it's getting to be difficult for us to communicate. Because
Why didn't you say that?
we had 5, we went to 7, we're back down.
Well, we got it 2 next week.
Now we're adding in other things. So we're really not taking into account what the public has told us. The public has said 70 to 130 million. What we're voting on is about 130 million on any of these, because you're adding 20 million into anything one. And we gotta communicate that to the community. What are we gonna say to the community where we're saying, okay, we're now above the 130 million?
Can we clarify this adding 20? Because these options were originally designed, right?
Option 2 middle school, and you guys went forward with option 1.
Option 2 was the original design,
In this pricing, and all the alternatives.
and the alternatives.
So when you go to here, it shows you option 2 for the middle school. So
I mean, I
option
think-
1,
I think this is a 7 through 8 one, right?
this is.
No, this is 6 to 8.
No, option.
Last one.
This would be a 6 to 8.
K to 2, 3 to 5 at Wentworth.
It's not a key.
But this is a K to 3.
This is an error.
No,
No,
this is
no,
a
no.
K2.
This is the
K2.
Yeah, it should be a key too.
And then there's also a K.
The
It's
survey-
number
the survey
17 in
option
the
is a
packet
K
from
to
tonight,
option.
that's
Yeah. Right.
Because it's all up in the air.
And you know what, I bet nobody out in the public knows if we're talking about a K2 or a K3 anyway, so it's all.
It's a K.
Really, I mean, it's.
It says K3.
We're working on it too,
No,
though.
we're looking at the very bottom.
The very
Oh, I
bottom one.
thought it
Very
was,
bottom.
thought it was the second, the third one.
Very bottom.
No, very bottom.
Alt B3, the bottom option is what the label is for.
Sorry, Matt.
Got it.
It's all
Oh,
like.
I'm sorry. Other discussion?
I think if there's one conclusion from the survey, it's like 40, 50, I saw on Facebook, 55% people said keep neighborhood schools. There's gonna be 10% of people that are just gonna vote no for anything, 'cause it's too expensive. I think the margin for success for consolidated is.
See, I think when we're looking at all these numbers and doing all this research, there's a lot we're learning, and you hear a lot of turmoil back and forth between people who were at one time very hard neighborhood school supporters, and I think it needs to be given its fair shake, because I think a lot's gonna be determined in the operating costs, and I think there's no harm in moving this along in the process. We're not listening right now, we're bringing the community options to see and to look at, and we're all kind of along with this. I think it would be a shame to not move forward something like this, especially when, as we're learning more about our limitations within the buildings, the ages of the buildings, the limitations of the major botanicals, and all of these.
How do you think that the K2 consolidated is preferable to the option that we currently have?
The other one's K3.
Right,
I think it's
so,
smaller.
but I'm just asking, what do you think the advantages are that would make that rise to the top over that, you're gonna have to vote on next week?
It would be smaller, it doesn't move the 6th grade out of the middle school. It keeps Wentworth 3 to 5, which for some people, the age grouping that we're currently in is where they like and where they feel comfortable. It decreases the amount of transitions the kids are going through compared to the other consolidated, that doesn't apply. But I'm hearing a lot of concerns from my community of young moms who are very concerned with their kids turning over constantly into new school systems with new areas. So I'm trying to take the feedback that I'm receiving and move along options that reflect that.
It leaves the age group similar to what we currently have.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I just wanna know, your thinking on this. Which option do you envision this perhaps replacing if that was a?
Oh, wow, so this is me speaking from a very personal standpoint, not reflective of anyone else. But
That's
I
okay.
would prefer this replaces the K3.
Okay.
Which one?
K3.
Option 2.
Option D.
That's what I
Oh,
assumed.
sorry, yes, option.
Yeah.
Can we go back to what that, you guys know what that was?
I think if you're looking at, right, where I've been thinking about this as we've all been talking, and there's a handful of criteria, right, that we're all gonna make decisions on and vote next week on. And when you look at the benchmarking, this is the only one that pretty much checks all the boxes, right? So I think it would be a disservice, right? That's why we're doing this, right? Is for the schools to get them to what they need. I think it's a disservice if we don't move forward.
Just a point of clarification, the other consolidated option also checks all the boxes, so those are the only.
Yeah,
But
and
that,
I'm not
those
talking
are
about
already on the
eliminating.
table for
Right, no,
next
yeah,
week.
I-
I think Dave's point was for discussion for next week, this has to get moved forward.
Because I think off of that, the benchmarking being so fulfilled, like I would like the kids to get as much as humanly possible. And I understand that we have a responsibility to the taxpayers and all of these things, but when I see an option fulfilling so much for our children, it seems like a shame to cut it off at its knees.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we get rid of the consolidated school by any means. I just think adding more into the mix is where I'm having a problem trying to communicate that to the public. I did, well, talk to some people at an event I was at last week, and probably half the people I talked to were totally in support of consolidated school. Said if it was in the community schools, things are both no automatic. One person even said, I'll donate money to a cause to have to consolidate.
Yeah, I think it's just when we're saying like, I mean, you know, we're not removing A or B, we're only adding, we made the very good argument that we didn't tell the community we were eliminating anything tonight. No one would be present if they were interested in it, they'd be waiting till next week's. I don't think it would be fair to say, well, we just adopted a neighborhood school, but we're not gonna remove any, but now that we're consolidating, now we gotta start removing things because we don't want people, I mean, there's people out there that are just frustrated that we're at this many options in general. Like, it's really hard for us weekly to follow this. I can't even imagine if you were just trying to read our slides after the meetings. So,
I think what I hear us trying to do is, right, like, these options that you're looking at this evening take into account the survey feedback that you got, right? And so what's, you know, the options that we're looking at right now, it's really a matter of these take bits and pieces from existing proposals, right? They're not new, fresh out of the box. So I hear what you're saying, Leroy, about your concern, but I don't think that there's anything up here that is so drastically different than what's being thought about already.
Well, aren't we talking about bringing this forward to next week to vote to remove or keep it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
what harm is there in moving it forward if one person in this room wants to look at it and decide that it's good or it's bad or whatever, but.
Yeah.
And I would just add, Leroy, if there were 1 week where we just did not care what the public thinks, it would be this coming week so that we can actually, because we're eliminating things next week. So like, we're working on the costs of these things, we're working on all these other side issues here. I don't care what the public thinks in this one coming week so that we can actually gather more information and make informed decisions next week.
Right.
We'll let them know next week.
So, so
And at that, I gotta go, I gotta take a fourth grader home, but I'm sitting in Tom's office.
Yeah, right. And so we need to move forward. My only comment on this, I think that this represents another consolidated option that's different enough. It's not a huge cost savings from option D, but it's different enough that maybe, you know, as you look at the benchmarking and you're trying to find things that solve the benchmarking, this isn't the same as the last referendum. Option D is essentially the same as the last referendum. So I think, you know, to put forward another consolidated option that maybe has some uniqueness that might get some people behind, at least we can put a narrative behind it if we determine that that's the way to go forward. So I think it's worth at least looking at for a week.
And we're trying to get the very best option, period.
That's the most palatable, right? And what we did here in the failed referendum was the K-3 concept was a mega school,
Yeah.
right? Because it was going to be built for over 1,100 students.
Yeah.
And so this kind of meets and addresses that concern.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other discussion?
Wait, we have to vote for, we We have to address
No, we
these.
don't, it goes straight to Mike as first alternate.
Okay, right. I just know the answer.
I just want to make a comment that you need to have.
Yeah, there you go.
Go ahead, Lisa.
You just need, you have to add 20 million to that for your option one percent for the middle school.
For option A, BA.
No, V3.
V3.
V3's cost now with option 1 middle school is actually 147-ish million.
So your option D with option 1 middle school was 142.7, just so that you guys have.
Point of clarification, those figures include AC insulation as well?
So what would that mean?
Okay. So we're gonna move forward with the vote on this to consider this alternate V3 for next week. Larry.
Yes.
Leroy. James.
No.
Tom.
Yes.
Fred. I'm sorry, alternate, Mike.
No.
Alternate Mike. Sorry.
Mike and alternate Mike.
Paul.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Sue.
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
Jenna.
Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
Carrie.
No.
Charlie's yes. Alyssa.
Yes.
Jim.
No.
Annalee.
No.
April.
Yes.
Ava. Jillian.
Yes.
Elizabeth.
Yes.
The motion passes 14-6.
I just want to make one comment on what you made. We do deeply care what the public.
Yes. We do.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
All right.
But,
That's not what Fred was saying.
but he's,
Yeah.
but
He's
we're
just-
talking
I
about,
understand.
we're
I just wanna
adding
make that
options
very
for
clear.
6 days,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think the public blowback will be that significant, right?
You guys are doing a fantastic job making sausage, and I have made a lot of sausage in public, this is really good. Like, in all seriousness, you're doing great.
Are there any other motions on the alternative options? Otherwise, we're gonna close it out. It's getting late, I understand that, but I don't wanna short side anything here if there's other strong feelings about these alternates. Okay, the last thing that I wanna introduce as just a concept, and Fred alluded to it, but and we'll talk more about it next week, but just as you go home and think about this, I thought what Fred presented as an option to move a consolidated option and a small schools option to give the public some comparison so they understand what they're giving up or getting with each option, I think really makes a lot of sense. I do intend to introduce that next week, so please just give it some thought over the week. We had more time, I would have debated it tonight, but I'll let us close out tonight.
I think we said makes a lot of sense.
All right, Matt, do you have any public comment?
Yeah, I had a couple of things, but mainly the fact that, you guys are trying to narrow stuff down. And you added, one option that wasn't even in the survey, and these guys have to communicate it. Yeah, they cherry pick, pieces of things, it's not like it's not public information. Nobody's been following this as closely as I have that I'm aware.
I think you're correct.
And the fact that you guys have spent 2 weeks talking about something that came up and haven't really even addressed any of the other options, with the exception of option 1 for the middle school or option 2 for the middle school. And there's still extras on this for another 20 million for all of these, plus in sleep, plus AC, plus option 1 for the middle school. I just, for the sake of transparency and for the sake of integrity in public perception of this committee, I think if you vote to keep this and get rid of A and B next week, I think that would rattle the public's confidence in what you're trying to do. Where you had 5 options, then you turn around and add a 6th one after you got rid of 2, I think it's just crazy. And there's been no discussion, or little discussion, if any, of the other 5 options, specifically C, D, and G. It's, but, you know, I think that I would tread lightly next week in selection as far as what's included and what isn't when you narrow down those numbers. That's all.
Motion to adjourn?
Almost here.
All in favor?